Golden Gate Bridge Labor Coalition workers planned to strike Friday, barring any last-minute labor contract settlement. Bus drivers say they will honor picket lines if a strike happens. The unions, representing 450 workers, were in a bargaining session with the Golden Gate Bridge District on Thursday. The Golden Gate Labor Coalition's Alex Tonneson.
We definitely don't like the fact that we're going to impact commuters in a negative way, and no one wants to do this. But, it comes down to if the district doesn't want to come to a reasonable agreement, then we have no other choice, and this is kind of the last resort.
The district wants to increase health insurance costs for workers, while the unions want no health care cost increases. The unions say they have fallen 12% behind the Bay Area cost of living, so they want 4% raises in each year of the 3-year contract. Philadelphia teachers and their supporters rallied Thursday to protest the elimination of the teachers' collective bargaining contract. Philadelphia Federation of Teachers Vice President Arlene Kempen says the district threw out the labor contract to try to solve a funding crisis on the backs of teachers.
That's just something that we weren't responsible for creating, and we're not going to let them do it. Our members have been the glue that's been holding the schools together. We did not have anything to do with the mismanagement of whatever monies they did have.
New York elected officials joined low-wage workers Thursday in New York City to condemn Walmart's impact on low-wage workers and their communities. Walmart hasn't opened any stores in New York City, but the Walmart model is being followed in many jobs across the city's 5 boroughs, according to a new report called Low-Wage Rage: How Walmart and the Walton family harm New York City's workforce. The New York City action was part of a national day of action protesting Walmart and the Walton family. A statement from Chicago Teachers Union President Karen Lewis thanked well-wishers and told them she looks forward to rejoining them again on the battlefield. Lewis underwent surgery this week for a cancerous brain tumor after dropping out of contention for the Chicago mayor's race. The Pennsylvania State Senate this week defeated an anti-union bill that would have ended automatic dues collections and political contributions from union public school workers. 6 Republican senators joined Democrats to defeat it. Organized labor in Pennsylvania says this was part of a broader Republican attack on unions and collective bargaining rights. The Rhode Island AFL-CIO is endorsing a Republican for the first time in 3 decades. Catherine, candidate for lieutenant governor, got the endorsement this week. Rhode Island AAO President George Nee issued a statement saying Taylor's understanding of the many challenges everyday Rhode Islanders face and her track record of listening to concerns of her employees at the Division of Elderly Affairs made her the right choice for the labor endorsement. Taylor's opponent, Democrat Daniel McKee, supports charter schools, and that was cited by the state AFL-CIO as one reason he didn't get its endorsement. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead, make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
This town gonna be here long after I'm gone. East side, west side, people don't surrender. They've been down, but they're still right on. Oh, and this town is my town. All right, love or hate, it don't matter. I'm gonna stand and fight. This time is my time. She got her ups and downs, but love or hate, it don't matter. 'Cause this is my town.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here. Glad to see everyone's still alive. The end of the world has not come. Everyone's not vomiting uncontrollably, and the end of the world isn't upon us at this very moment, as I was fully expecting. I was expecting this to be the end of the world, and I got a number of emails from folks going, really? Is it the end of the world? I'm going, no, I'm being facetious. I don't know if you can tell that it's sarcasm. I quite clearly believe that this is all just being hyped by the right-wing media as more of an attack. See, government can't do anything right. We've been starving for years now. We've been hampering them. We've been abusing and beating and sending any good people out of the system. And now, at the time of crisis, going, oh, do something. Am I the only one who sees that this is the really, this is 30, 40 years of an attack on government. See, they can't do anything right. And then at the moment where you go, save us, no one's going, but, there's no saving you. It's just nuts. And, I got a number of emails from people going, well, we should have a travel ban. In fact, Brian sent me an email saying we should have a travel ban and keep people we don't want out of our nation. Is that so difficult for you to grasp? Genius. And I took I took it the way I think he meant it, that we should have a conversation about closing the border off the trail. And the thing is what I find really amazing is that there are people who believe there's nothing being done. And if you listen to the talking heads who aren't really news people, these are entertainers. These are the infotainment industry is what wants us all riled up and wants us fearing for our very existence. So we go cowering away and buying plastic suits. Crisis good for business. You know how many ads I've seen for Ebola suits? You can now buy those space suits, with the plastic and the rubber gloves and you could don the whole outfit and walk away. And I wonder, because you're not supposed to be able to cover your face going into a bank. I wonder if you go in looking like a spaceman, if they would let you in, because after all, the media is telling me we're all going to die. But what's interesting to me, though, is there are a lot of folks who believe nothing's being done. Nothing. I mean, it's amazing to me that, you've got people who think that these agencies can control everything whenever they want. It's like a switch you can flip on and off. And, given the fact that they've been systematically defunded, and you can go back and you could pick out thousands of statements. In fact, I forget the name of the group, but they've put out an ad that basically just takes all of the Republicans that they could find and shows you the clips of them saying, cut, indiscriminately, just slash and burn. And it's all the things that we've been talking about for years now coming to fruition. Understand. I know you can't throw money at the problem, but if you don't have any money, that is a problem. And the Ebola thing, while the rest of the world, not our problem yet because it hasn't come to our borders, I got to wonder how much of this is, well, now we've got to do something because it's on our borders. So on the travel ban front, I've spent some time thinking about this, and my knee-jerk reaction, which I try never to do, is, close off the borders. And then it got me thinking, going, well, people are going to come in anyway. I would rather people, say I came from this place and, I wasn't exposed or I may have been or whatever, so that you can track where these folks have come from. And in fact, they have been and they are. But to me, I don't know that I want, because look, how many Americans go to Cuba every year? And you're not supposed to because there's a travel ban to Cuba, right? I know about 15 people who have been there. And that's not even me looking really hard. So, if you look at, if we put these travel bans in place, all you're going to do is have people shifting around, figuring out how to get in one way or another, and then turning them into liars. If we can track folks and have them go, we want to make sure that everyone's safe and I'm coming from these areas, I think that's a little bit better. I just think it is. And what's interesting to me on the whole, well, we let everybody in front. Evidently, since about the mid 2000 era, the CDC has been. They have this list, this do not board list, that prevents people from coming from countries with communicable diseases from getting on commercial airlines. They've had it for a while, and according to the Congressional Research Service, according to them in one of their reports, that they review the legalities of this stuff. Evidently, state and federal authorities have the ability to quarantine people who pose a danger to the public health and to the public good. And evidently, according to the report, it's constitutional. And I was surprised when I read this. They said, according to the Commerce Clause in the Constitution, it gives the federal government the ability to quarantine people. And on the state level, the authority exists to exercise state powers, policing powers. So, it's perfectly constitutional to say, you know what, you've been exposed to this stuff. And this is what I thought they should have done from the beginning in Dallas. And they did. I think they butchered what happened in Dallas because I think they were completely unprepared and untrained. Because again, it's not about health. It's not about keeping people healthy in these private hospitals. It's about making money, and lots of it. And I just found it very interesting that, we're in this moment where everyone's pointing the fingers at Obama and the CDC and says, oh, you should be doing something. When this isn't the moment you're saying you should have been doing something, that's too late. We should have been talking about this 3-4 years ago. And I do remember me on this program saying, if you defund the NIH and you defund the CDC and you defund all of these public health organizations, what kind of crisis are you creating? What mess are you making? And it's exactly what we've done when you're cutting hundreds of millions of dollars. And this is the thing, and I kept saying it, austerity kills. And not just, from a public health standpoint. I mean, the austerity of cutting off our research and development money is one thing. The other part of it is cutting off money for infrastructure, cutting off money for education, cutting off money for, I don't know, thinking beyond the tips of our nose. That is dangerous. And this whole push towards defunding and the slash and burn austerity diminishes our ability to take care of problems in the future. And I said that a million times when the hostage situations were going on, when they were taking us to the brink of disaster, never mind the billions of dollars of economic activity that were lost because of all that. All that aside, this is another problem that they created. This is what happens when you have people who all they do is stick their fingers in their ear and have their little temper tantrum saying, I want cuts, cut, which is what they did for about 2.5 years. And again, it comes back to, the same thing that happened the last 2 years of the Clinton administration. They had their fingers in their ears, throwing their little temper tantrum. And what happens? Our eye was off the ball. We were worried about what was behind Bill's zipper while Al-Qaeda and the rest of them were growing, and the Taliban were going stronger. And yet, here we are again, couple-year gap of eyes completely off the ball. And what do we end up with? Well, the potential end of the world. I'm told it's coming. If you watch CNN, the all scare the hell out of me every minute network, it's coming. So we're going to talk about that. Also going to talk about education, some interesting job situations going on. Lots to get to. And in the third hour, and maybe a little bit about the follies of the election cycle. We're coming down to the wire. There are some funny things going on and some really dumb things. Aside from the fan. The fan was my favorite. And if you're near the computer, Google Rick Scott and the fan. Nothing better than Fangate. Got to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You listen to the Rick Smith Show. We're working people.
So you might start represent. Say the USA is drowning in grafted lies. Say the USA and resume the ties it binds. Stop taking all our money and shipping it offshore. Do the job you're looking for.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is your World in 2. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service. Once a year, the 193 members of the UN General Assembly meet in New York to select 5 countries to serve on the UN Security Council. Much of the drama of the process has been stripped away, with continental groups deciding well in advance who will be nominated. But this year, after Angola, Malaysia, New Zealand, and Venezuela coasted through a first round of votes, 2 countries remain to contest the final seat, Spain and Turkey. It took 3 rounds of voting for one of them to earn the necessary majority.
Spain, 132. Turkey, 60.
Both Spain and Turkey have served on the council before, but Turkey's defeat stings as the country attempts to highlight its geopolitical relevance. Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu traveled to New York to drum up support and participate in today's vote, but his presence wasn't enough to tip the scales. Turkey is deeply affected by both the Syrian civil war and the current campaign against the Islamic State, but Ankara's decision earlier this week to bomb Kurdish PKK militants within its own borders, instead of assisting the Kurdish defenders across the border in Kobani, appeared to dampen the country's diplomatic standing. After Venezuela's election to the council, its foreign minister, Rafael Ramirez, dedicated the victory to Commander Hugo Chavez, saying the country's recognition was a sign of global support for its program of social justice. The United States was unconvinced. In an unusually pointed statement, Ambassador Samantha Power alleged that, quote, Venezuela's conduct at the UN has run counter to the spirit of the UN Charter, and its violations of human rights at home are at odds with the Charter's letter. The 5 new members of the Security Council will begin their 2-year terms in January. For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm John Kerr. Fox News' Shep Smith resumed his role as his network's voice of reason when he opened his show blasting the fear-mongering and misinformation about Ebola being perpetuated by a range of media outlets.
Fear not. Do not listen to the hysterical voices on the radio and the television or read the fear-provoking words online. The people who say and write hysterical things are being very irresponsible. Here are the facts. Suggestions have been made publicly that leaders and medical professionals may be lying to us. Those suggestions are completely without basis in fact. We don't have an outbreak. We have 2 sick people from 1 dying man. And the rest of this should stop because it's not productive and it's not worth ratings and it's not worth politics. And we all need to stop it.
Smith's monologue comes days after his Fox News colleagues Bill O'Reilly and Laura Ingraham compared CDC Director Dr. Thomas Frieden to a propagandist. And after Fox's Sean Hannity said on his radio show that he would ignore the CDC press conference because he doesn't trust them. For more on this and other stories, visit MediaMatters.org.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
We make Pennsylvania happen!
Look around, they're moving in. Hold the ground when they begin. We can do it, we can do it, and if they wanna make a try, then they'll never get here. Then they can get out of here. Gonna keep on driving, never stop. United, 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 we stand. United, we never shall fall.
Well, you know, that's the hope. The hope is that more of the attacks come, the more the side-swiping, the ambushing, the more all that comes out from the right and the corporatists, the more we stand together and fight back. You look at what happened in York as the York City School District. They were going to privatize the entire district, hand it over to the charter schools operators, and the community came together, the teachers, the students, everyone came together, and made their voices loud and clear. And what happened? Well, they voted it down. And what you see in Philadelphia, I'm seeing the exact same thing. You're seeing parents and students and teachers and everybody going the ambush that the SRC pulled recently of terminating the teacher's contract and then imposing their will and massive compensation cuts. The hope is we see more of that in the streets, more of that, well, people screaming and hollering at meetings. And one of those folks on the front lines, Ted Kirsch, he's the president of the Pennsylvania American Federation of Teachers, former head of the Philadelphia Federation of Teachers. Ted, thanks for taking time for us.
Always a pleasure to join you and your listeners.
So you look at this ambush, and I can't find anything like this that in my recollection of where someone just goes, you know what, we've decided today we don't have to honor our contract with you.
Well, actually, the former school board in the year 2000 did the same thing to us. Members went nuts, and we went out on strike. And it was on a Friday afternoon we went out and settled Monday morning. But the facts aren't quite the same this time around. There's a law now that prohibits teachers from striking with punishments, but it is just a horrendous thing when you just stop and put it in perspective of what they have done. They just unilaterally said, we don't care about your contract. We're going to just make all these changes and throw it out. The last time they negotiated was in July, and they just didn't meet since then and just imposed. As you said earlier, people are furious. The students, the parents, the other unionists who have really rallied. We, on behalf of the PFT, we had a rally yesterday. Papers say 3,000 people showed up. It's hard to judge when, as far as you can look, you see people all joining together to oppose what the School Reform Commission has done to the members of the Federation of Teachers.
Do you think this is, a situation of a cornered rat where they see their time is limited and they've got to hurry up and do the drastic stuff because they know they're probably going to be gone very soon, and this is a last ditch effort to impose their ideology of pushing towards a private education system?
Well, we think, first of all, look at the polling numbers with the election. And I think that one of their strategies was to force the teachers to go out on strike and react, which is what we did the last time, but we're not doing it this time. And that this would be a boost to, remember, the SRC, that's Corbett's group.
Correct.
To give them an issue. You see, I've been telling you what these teachers are like. They're greedy. They won't offer all this stuff. And he's been saying, since he had a poll over a year ago, if you demonize the teachers, it will work for you. Well, he's tried it, and it hasn't worked, and it's backfiring. And the people are just so angry that they're mobilizing to make sure that Corbett, is one-term Tom.
Because at the end of this all, in my view, falls at his doorstep. That what was going on in York, what's going on in Philadelphia, what's going on in school districts across the Commonwealth comes down to the fact that this guy cut $1 billion from education each of the last 3 years.
And I'm glad you said each of the last 3 years, because they keep saying, well, he cut $1 billion. Yeah, he cut $1 billion. But he cut $1 billion each year. And as I say to people, I'm not a math teacher, I'm a history teacher. But to me, that's 1 + 1 + 1. And now we're into another plus. That's close to $4 million. Billion. Let me get that right.
Yeah.
$1 billion. And it is cross-party lines. It's not just against Democrats. It's against Republicans. It's affecting every community in this state. It's a disaster.
Yeah, and as I've been saying, look, right now, the communities that are most at the margin, Philadelphia and York City school districts, the schools that don't have the property tax base that you're able to raise to make up the difference, they're obviously the first ones going to suffer, but everyone else is in the same boat eventually.
That's right. If they get away with this, it goes down the line. And it's interesting that the people who suffer the most are the kids that need the most, the poorest kids. The kids of color are the ones that get hit first. And then it's a ripple effect. It'll be over the whole state.
Yeah, I keep saying, you can't, and the reason I keep talking about this is because it's important that everyone understand that this is dish. This is where they cook up the experiment that they're going to move across the state, and this is going on all across the country, really.
That's right. You look at Michigan and Wisconsin and Ohio. It's a Republican right wing, and this doesn't mean they're all Republicans, but it's a real right wing movement, and it is going all over the country, and we got to stop it now, once and for all. So now Pennsylvania is where we're digging in.
Yeah. So now you had this huge rally yesterday, mobilizing, hopefully, because as I've been saying as a parent, there's part of me that says that the teachers shouldn't go on strike. The parents should, because this is the kids' future. If you end up in a situation where children are stuffed into warehoused into a classroom, 50 kids to a class, or there's no nurse or no guidance counselor or no librarian, what's the point in going to a school that isn't functional because the resources have been stolen out? I got to say the parents should be the one going, we're just not sending our kids.
Well, it's an interesting thought, because yesterday at the rally, there were a group of students, and some of the students are organized, and they were the ones going for strike, strike, strike. Wait a minute, there were a lot of issues here, but it was the kids who were the most enthusiastic, except for one of my colleagues, Henry Nicholas, who was president of the 1199, the ASME local in Philadelphia. And Henry, a true trade unionist for many, many years that we've been friends, Henry wants to call a citywide strike, which was not the first time that this call has gone through, but I was involved the first time, but the facts, again, are not the same.
Yeah, I said that right when it happened. I said, is now the time for this? But yesterday we talked with a student from the York City School District who the students were like, this is our future. We've got to be the ones taking the lead on this. And next week I'm going to talk to a Philadelphia school a student who kind of the same thing, that they're empowered. And as I brought up to the girl yesterday, we talk about teaching civics. We talk about teaching engagement in our government and the workings of our government. This is a frontline learning opportunity for kids right now.
For those that are engaged, they understand it. Nobody can actually gauge how widespread the student reaction is, other than those that are in some of these organizations. But there's a fundamental issue here that affects not just the members of the PFT, but the members of the labor movement. That if a boss, put it in that sense, a boss says, I don't want to deal with you anymore and I'm going to get rid of you, it's the end of collective bargaining. It's the beginning or continuation of the destruction of the middle class in this country. And people have to look at it in the big picture, not to say, well, I pay for my health care, why shouldn't teachers? Because the school district is lying. The school district has not said that Jerry Jordan, the president of the PFT, offered $24 million in health care givebacks. That was in July. The school district has already carved out 17 more million by increasing class size, by the cuts that they've made. That's a sizable cut of sacrifices that the employees are making. They never responded at the table to that. They haven't met, and they're saying that, the offer was $2 million. Well, guess what? Our numbers are certified by public accountants, CPAs. We're not making up numbers. Our numbers are real, and they continue to lie about what's really going on.
But at the end of the day, do you think it's more about ideology than it is about money? Because, I look at this and I hear you saying this, because most of the people that I know are perfectly reasonable. If there's trouble, let's roll up our sleeves. We'll figure it out. We'll fix it. This just seems to me to be opportunists seeing a crisis and going, what? Now's the time to inflict our will.
You know what? I think it's a combination of both. The money situation is real. Philadelphia has really been cut. And this tax, they're all saying, well, we just gave them a cigarette tax. I laugh because I don't know many people who smoke anymore. I think that's, pardon the pun, a smoke screen in terms of it's not going to generate the money they're projecting.
No.
So it's ideological in that it's against the union, and the money thing is real. And the answer is, let's sit down legislatively. Let's come up with a fair funding formula.
Yep.
We had it during the administration of Rendell. People knew what they were getting. If you look at the numbers, how the poorer areas have been cut the most. Some of the areas.
So let me ask you this, because, you come back to the funding, and I lay this again at the feet of Corbett and the massive cuts that have gone on. Does November 4th change the situation when Tom Wolf comes in? Do we see an increase in funding for education, or maybe a fair funding formula to where some of this goes away, and now we're back in different times, or what do you see?
Well, number one, I am a very full supporter of Tom Wolf. But as I've gone around and talked to groups of our members, I've said, don't think that by winning this election, and I keep saying we're winning, we're going to win it, that Tom Wolf is the Messiah, that he's suddenly going to solve our problems. We still have to deal with a Republican-controlled Senate, a Republican-controlled House. I don't believe it's going to change in this election. Hopefully one of them does. Probably the Senate, best chances. But Wolf has already said, we don't have to increase taxes. We know where the money is. We've got to tax the shale gas operation.
Yep.
There's money there, and put that money back into education. And I think that if there are enough reasonable, that's in quotes, question marks, reasonable members of the Republican Party who are elected, that they can sit down and compromise. Because as I've said before, it's not a Republican-Democratic issue. It's affecting everybody, and it affects their communities as well. And so therefore, it would be good if, unlike in Washington, that in Harrisburg, we could have a governor who can sit down and work out to solve problems with the legislature. And I think Tom Wolf is that kind of a guy. He's not an ideologue. He's not unreasonable. He is a decent, good human being. And he's not a politician.
Yeah.
He wants to do what's right and what's good. And that's what's helping drive me to make sure that he now takes over the state for the next 8 years, my quote.
Yeah, and the hope is that you don't end up that you can maybe take a step back in this ambush that the SRC pulled and then sit down and actually have the conversation. Because to me, it just looked like this was pure opportunism and to cut teachers' pay. And because one of the things I did want to go back to is you had said that you guys were willing to take some cuts and pay a little bit more in healthcare. What I think most people don't realize. And it's one of my big frustrations. Your benefits are part of your pay package. It's part of your compensation. So if you're being mandated to pay more for healthcare, that is a pay cut. And I don't know how much simpler it can be, other than how I put it. And as I understand, and I'm sure you can speak better to this than I can, the Philadelphia teachers are already about 19% lower in pay than the surrounding areas. And now you're throwing on top of this upwards of a 13% increase in healthcare contributions. Isn't that going to make that situation worse? And are you going to have a hard time retaining teachers? And then having that turnover cost the district more money? This just seems like a bad idea all the way around.
Well, I agree. Number one, our salaries are lower in the area. And you're right. One of the reasons that people stayed in teaching here, well, our salaries are low, but at least we have someday a pension, and at least we have health care. That's part of the process. There are years, and when I was president, we negotiated. We didn't take pay raises. We took the added cost for health care as part of our package. But what's really interesting, the head of the School Reform Commission, Bill Green, Jr., said, oh, it's not a pay cut. If you have a family, you've got kids, you're talking about keeping what you have now, $600 a month in healthcare costs. $600 a month. That's not a pay cut. What, are they kidding me? And what's interesting, when his father was the mayor of Philadelphia. And I said this to him personally yesterday at the School Reform Commission meeting. I don't know if it's genetic, and I don't know if there's something in the water at the Green household, but your father did this to us in 1981. He took a 10% raise that was in the collective bargaining agreement, and as mayor, he refused to give it. And that's one of the reasons the salaries are lower in Philadelphia. In 81, we lost 10%. Well, each year that 10% would have added up. We would have been competitive with the school districts in the suburbs, but we're not because of Bill Green's 10% cut. And they say we want to have the best teachers. You should hear what teachers are saying. How do I get out? I don't have to work here. I love these kids. I want to do a good job, but I can't afford it with what they're doing to me. So we're going to be losing really good teachers who are just so fed up and frustrated. If they're close to retirement, they're saying, I'm out of here. And if not, there are people saying, I have skills. I can go to the suburbs. I can go into a situation where there's a better climate. They're going to destroy the public school system, which I honestly believe is part of their agenda.
Now, that was my last line of questioning. Is this not the the final straw in the big plan, which is to destroy what's left of what the public school is in favor of education incorporated and privatizing, and then leaving the public school in a shambles for the kids who can't get into those charter schools?
This is really a class battle. They're talking about supporting and creating a poor class of people who will have nobody to advocate for them, nobody to do what we all believe the equal opportunities that kids should all have. They should have the same rights, the same programs as the kid who lives across the street from the boundary of Philadelphia, where they have everything, because their parents realize that it's important, that education is important. Well, these kids don't have the advocates. They don't come from the same kind of background that many of those kids that have everything. And for those that say money doesn't matter, a professor from Temple who was head of the education department said in a speech a few years ago, and I've never forgotten what he said, if money doesn't matter, how come that all the school districts that have money always do better? I rest my case.
Yeah, as I've always said, money doesn't matter until you don't have any.
True.
And what's going on is what we've seen the last 3.5 years is we've seen a starving of the beast, if you will, a starving of public education. And in my view, to systematically dismantle it. Ted, I appreciate you taking time for us as this continues. I'd love to have you back on to keep us updated on what you guys are doing down there.
I'll be glad to do that. But what your listeners should know, that the first step that we have just undergone, I think it was today, I'm not 100% sure, but we are going to court.
Right.
We're going to court because we believe that what they have done is illegal, even though it's immoral, and nobody questions the immorality of what they've done. We also believe it's illegal, and so our first course of action will be to go through the courts.
And good.
And I said our first course of action.
No, that's the first step. And then we'll see where it takes us. I'd love to have you back again as this continues, though, Ted. Thanks so much.
I'll be available anytime you call, Rick.
All righty. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Scared for the bosses, don't listen to their lies. Poor folks ain't got a chance unless they organize. Which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on? Which side are you on, boys? Which side are you? Which side? Which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on? Which side are you on, boys? Which side? Which side? Which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on? Which side are you on, boys? Which side? Which side?
Climate change is in large part due to human activity.
Paul Ryan backs away, sort of, from outright climate science denial.
You see some change of tone even from those who have been aggressive climate change deniers.
We may have reached peak climate change denial.
Natural gas, if extracted safely, it's the bridge fuel that can power our economy with less of the carbon pollution that causes climate change.
Turns out natural gas isn't a bridge fuel to a low emissions future. Plus, did a U.S. defense contractor really invent a compact nuclear fusion reactor? Separating fact from fiction.
Because that's what we do. All of that and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comments.
From the intersection of politics and unmitigated corporate gall.
Hey, Rachel Maddow, don't give away our address on live TV. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, let me say before we begin that I am highly, highly dubious of the theories that you offered in the teaser that these right-wingers, Paul Ryan and other climate science deniers, are actually backing off of their climate science denial.
I would call it more like tricky waffling, if anything.
Yeah, at best.
Well, we'll get to that in a moment. But first, you may have heard the big splash this week that aerospace and defense giant Lockheed Martin made with a press release claiming that their research team had achieved the holy grail of nuclear energy, a breakthrough in nuclear fusion, promising small and super cheap nuclear reactors the size of a pickup truck.
No, actually, I didn't hear that. Then again, I've been hiding in the basement with my Ebola hazmat suit on, so I don't really know much of what's going on at all.
Well, not to worry. It does look like nuclear scientists who are not employed by Lockheed Martin are pouring skepticism all over that press release, noting that it lacks technical details like actual results that can be independently verified and an actual working prototype. They say the press release appears to be just angling for more research money.
But what would this nuclear fusion device mean if it was for real?
It's perpetually 10 to 30 years in the future, but if it were for real, it would be a small nuclear reactor that would have very little nuclear waste and would hopefully be a lot cheaper and quicker to construct.
And safer, right? Because nuclear fusion is different than the nuclear fission that we have in our current nuclear reactors.
Right.
But you remain skeptical.
As do most nuclear scientists, apparently.
Good. Good for you and good for them.
Meanwhile, natural gas is not a bridge fuel that will help the U.S. transition to a low-emissions future, as President Obama has claimed. That's according to a new study published this week in the journal Nature. The study examines a lot of moving parts, including energy markets and future energy demand. But the basic upshot of this study is that even if natural gas drillers curbed their methane gas leaks, the surge in cheap, cleaner natural gas is actually increasing energy use and emissions in the U.S., which is offsetting emissions cuts from coal. And worse, investment in the fracking boom is displacing investment in renewable energy sources.
To give the context, a lot of environmentalists had pointed to natural gas, said, oh, it doesn't put off as much carbon, but in fact, it puts off a whole lot more methane, which is also a greenhouse gas. And now we're using more of it because we're producing so much more of it.
Yeah, that's right. Moving on to elections, we've been reporting how the corporate media has suddenly decided to ask candidates about climate change after thoroughly ignoring it for years. In general, Democratic candidates this cycle have walked a fine line of accepting climate science without alienating the fossil fuel industry. But it's getting really tricky for Republicans, where outright denial was a litmus test in the primaries, but is not helpful in the general election. Here's Wisconsin Republican Representative Paul Ryan, who outright denied global warming as a vice presidential candidate just 2 years ago. Now he's shifting to saying he doesn't know if humans are responsible in a debate this week.
I don't know the answer to that question, and I don't think science does either. Does climate change occur? Yeah. Yes, of course we have climate change. We've had climate change forever. Is human involvement involved? Yes, it is. What extent? I don't know.
Yeah, he doesn't know. The scientists know, but he ignores those scientists because, he's not a scientist, all of that.
It does look like the political tide may be turning against climate denial, at least according to the State Department's chief climate negotiator with the United Nations, Todd Stern.
I think we are moving toward a tipping point. We're not there yet, but it's coming, I think. You see some change of tone even from those who have been aggressive climate change deniers. I doubt actually that even a year from now, whether major political candidates will consider it a viable strategy to deny the existence of climate change.
I think that Todd Stern of the U.S. State Department is a climate change denier. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. While you're there, please consider a donation to help the Green News Report stay on the air and help bradblog.com do all that we do. We really need your help. Find us and follow us on the Facebooks and the Twitter at Green News Report. From Brad.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Dreamer, you know you are a dreamer. Well, can you put your hands in your head? Oh no, I said dreamer, nothing but a dream.
I think what we did was reform the student loan program. We're not cutting money out of it. In other words, people aren't going to be cut off the program. We're just making sure it works better.
But I guess that's why they say every rose has its thorn. Just like every night has its dawn. Just like every cowboy sings a sad song. Every rose has its thorn.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. I was looking at the really an interesting little mock-up by the folks over at Wallet Hub. And they point out that, the best states in the country for student loan debt, places like Utah and Wyoming, North Dakota, Virginia. So the worst place in the country for student loan debt, Rhode Island. Maine, Georgia, South Carolina, Oregon, Ohio, Connecticut, Mississippi, New York, Alabama, Pennsylvania, 38th. So 3 spots above Alabama. And you look at the reality of what's going on, and we're seeing considerably more students filing for default or being pushed into default. In fact, a new report put out by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the dreaded CFPB, they've highlighted that people are complaining that borrowers who are struggling to pay their student loans are being forced into default by a lack of information and options. According to the report, private student loan companies are not providing concrete loan modification options. They go on to say struggling private student loan borrowers are finding themselves out of luck and out of option. Richard Cordry, the CFPB director, said that, when all this stuff, not good. Consumer Union Agency Suzanne Martindale said the CFPB's report makes it brutally clear how tough and inflexible the terms for private student loans can be. Think about it this way, and this is one of those things that get me. You can never rid yourself of student loans. You get big corporations take out big loans, they go through bankruptcy. You're forgiven. The anointed, you are forgiven. You can take out a mortgage, you're forgiven. Not student loans. That follows you. That's there forever, like herpes. And part of me understands it, but when you put it to some of these predatory lenders, especially when you're looking at, and this is what bothers me with what's going on with the whole field of education. You look at what we've allowed to happen in the higher ed areas. All of these propping up of these new colleges nobody's ever heard of, or using the names of existing colleges and using a whole online kind of twisted model designed specifically to maximize as much profit as possible. And you end up with a bunch of people with massive student loans and no degree. And that's one of those things that, just leaves me scratching my head, because there's all of this, oh, it's so easy and you can do it in your spare time. Just take out tens of thousands of dollars in student loans and you'll have this degree. And then at the end of it, you have this piece of paper, or most of them don't. I think the graduation rates in some of these for-profit universities, and you know the names of them, about 10 to 15% tops. Originally, in my view, it was just a way to bilk the GI Bill. It was a way to get money off of the taxpayers to fund, because the big one, and you know the name of it, named after a city in Arizona, the big one. The number I saw was like something around 80% of the money that they bring in is from the GI Bill, from the soldiers coming back, or even being in Afghanistan or Iraq. Because I had taken an online master's course not too long ago, and about half of the students were stationed in Iraq and Afghanistan. And it's one of those, because you can do it online, you can do it anywhere. And it's this whole bilking of the system. And the education, I don't think is up to par, even if you do complete the degree, which unfortunately the vast majority don't. And it's about the money. So when you push all of these people into taking out all of these loans and they have nothing at the end of it, and then you say, well, those are the terms you made, even though you can't find a job. And let's say you did finish and you still can't find a job, we're going to put you into default, because I'm certain there are a bunch of financial sweeteners for the loan company to enrich themselves. Lots of penalties and fees and all that stuff to make sure that if you are in default, that they make a higher rate, knowing that for the rest of your life, you're going to be paying on this. And that's one of the frustrating things I have with education as a whole. As you look at what's going on in Philadelphia and what was almost going to happen in New York City School District, this push towards privatizing, I do believe, and you can mark it down, and I've said it a million times, so it's well documented, I do believe the push is going to be K through, or actually pre-K through 12, much like the model that we've seen for higher ed. That you're going to have to take out loans to get your kids into the good schools first, and then it'll filter down to the rest to eventually either you can afford it or you can't. And if you can't, then you'll be left in the public schools that have crumbled. Because for the last several years, we've been defunding it. And I go back and I think about, just myself. When I went to high school, the local high school had all kinds of extra stuff, had all kinds of vocational stuff, extracurricular activities, all kind of stuff. I'm told now that all of those vocational things that they had locally, they've done away with, and they've consolidated on the county level. And you have to struggle to get into them, which just seems dumb to me. My local school district, as I understand, has done away with the cosmetology program because they claim it's too costly, even though there were people who really wanted to be in it. And again, and then as the story was told to me by someone who almost got screwed by them cutting it off early, they're only allowing X amount of people to be in the program, which they will, put on the county level. So if you're the sixth or seventh person who wants in the program and they're only taking 5, you're basically SOL. And I always thought that, education those were those opportunities, and we made sure that they were abundant so that people had the chance to try different things that, just maybe it's my twisted thinking. But I look at the money game in all this, and when the profiteers start filtering down, and the wealth class starts saying, hey, this is the next latest, greatest investment, worry, because they know what they're doing when it comes to making money. They don't really know what they're doing when it comes to educating your children. And that's a frustration that I have. And I myself have been frustrated at the fact that I don't see enough outrage yet. And maybe it's that, it just hasn't really hit home yet. I look at Philadelphia, I look at York, I see people active and engaged. I don't see that so much in other areas. And for me, though, the whole testing regime, this is a point where parents should be just, enraged. And maybe it's coming. but it's just not right now. So again, my frustration with this, as we allow what's going on to happen in places like Philadelphia, in inner city and in poverty-ridden areas. And there's part of me, and I'm sure that this plays into it. Well, it's not in my backyard. The old Tina mentality. There's no alternative. We need to just let that happen as long as it's not in my backyard. And that's kind of a frustration because eventually we know that eventually it comes to our backyard. And if we allow this to happen, what does it say about us and our future? I mean, you're going to need, well, it's just frustrating. So I look at what's going on in Philly with this ambush, and I hope that the lawsuit that the Philadelphia Federation of Teachers filed will help to undo the imposition and undo the just this ambush, this ridiculous ambush, of which I truly believe that this is done now simply because they all know they're done at the end of the year. And Ted wasn't entirely willing to go there with me, but I think this is opportunism at its best. They stalled, they delayed, they wanted to see how the governor's race was going to turn out. It doesn't look good for them or for Corbett, and they know they're gone, and they know that they'll be replaced. So they want to put in as much of their agenda and as much of their ideology as possible. And that's the problem when you have, which is why I'm hoping there's not going to be a lame duck session at the end of the year after November 4th. And I've been told, and it makes sense that, the people who are the leadership in the Senate have said here in Pennsylvania that there will be no lame duck. So my fear of this being the next Michigan, my fears have been slightly allayed. I still kind of worry. But I think the Scott Wagner letter, I think that may have solidified the leadership into we're doing nothing to bring him back, to give him a pulpit. So that's a good thing. But no, I'm looking at the numbers, and the student loan debt is just outrageous. When you look at the average student debt in a state like Delaware being 2 times higher than it is in New Mexico, and you look at the proportion of students with debt double in South Carolina than what it is in Nevada, you kind of go, there's a problem. And the other thing that gets me is the percentage of, according to Wallet Hub, the percentage of student loan debt for people 50 and older in Vermont is 3 times higher than it is in Hawaii. And you go, why is that? I would argue that a lot of the industry in Vermont is changing, and people are going back to school and and trying to upgrade their skills. Or is it just that it's so expensive? Now, Pennsylvania, it's kind of surprising to me, to be honest with you, that the student loan debt puts us at number 38. That's kind of surprising to me when you look at the state system that has a good opportunity to not be completely mugged. But 38th. That puts us down near the bottom. And I thought we were on the other hand, 38th, tied with Florida, us in Michigan. And it just kind of leaves you going, just a very short period of time. And you look at these kids saddled with over $1 trillion in student loan debt. It's kind of frustrating. And I got to tell you, I'm waiting for this generation of kids to go, wait a minute. I don't want to get ripped off. I don't want to get mugged. And that's what it seems like to me. I mean, it's just a mugging on really a high level. Anyway, if you missed any portion of the program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on your smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. You can also email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back after this.
We gotta do it today. No more mindless confusion. No more disarray.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast, smithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. Golden Gate Bridge Labor Coalition workers planned to strike Friday, barring any last-minute labor contract settlement. Bus drivers say they will honor picket lines if a strike happens. The unions representing 400 bargaining session with the Golden Gate Bridge District on Thursday. The Golden Gate Labor Coalition's Alex Tonneson.
We definitely don't like the fact that we're going to impact commuters in a negative way, and no one wants to do this. But, it comes down to if the district doesn't want to come to a reasonable agreement, then we have no other choice, and this is kind of a last resort.
The district wants to increase health insurance costs for workers, while the unions want no health care cost increases. The unions say they have fallen 12% behind the Bay Area cost of living, so they want 4% raises in each year of the 3-year contract. Philadelphia teachers and their supporters rallied Thursday to protest the elimination of the teachers' collective bargaining contract. Philadelphia Federation of Teachers Vice President Arlene Kempen says the district threw out the labor contract to try to solve a funding crisis on the backs of teachers.
That's just something that we weren't responsible for creating, and we're not going to let them do it. Our members have been the glue that's been holding the schools together. We did not have anything to do with the mismanagement of whatever monies they did have.
New York elected officials joined low-wage workers Thursday in New York City to condemn Walmart's impact on low-wage workers and their communities. Walmart hasn't opened any stores in New York City, but the Walmart model is being followed in many jobs across the city's 5 boroughs, according to a new report called Low-Wage Rage: How Walmart and the Walton family harm New York City's workforce. The New York City action was part of a national day of action protesting Walmart and the Walton family. A statement from Chicago Teachers Union President Karen Lewis thanked well-wishers and told them she looks forward to rejoining them again on the battlefield. Lewis underwent surgery this week for a cancerous brain tumor after dropping out of contention for the Chicago mayor's race. The Pennsylvania State Senate this week defeated an anti-union bill that would have ended automatic dues collections and political contributions from union public school workers. 6 Republican senators joined Democrats to defeat it. Organized labor in Pennsylvania says this was part of a broader Republican attack on unions and collective bargaining rights. The Rhode Island AFL-CIO is endorsing a Republican for the first time in 3 decades. Catherine Taylor, the Republican candidate for lieutenant governor, got the endorsement this week. Rhode Island AFL-CIO President George Nee issued a statement saying Taylor's understanding of the many challenges everyday Rhode Islanders face and her track record of listening to concerns of her employees at the Division of Elderly Affairs made her the right choice for the labor endorsement. Taylor's opponent, Democrat Daniel McKee, supports charter schools, and that was cited by the state AFL-CIO as one reason he didn't get its endorsement. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
We're not in this fight alone. This fight isn't just about Verizon, but about all the corporate greed in this country. You are done. We are here to put you down. Every last one of you corporate executives taking and raping from the average person. We are the working class. We are the 99%. We are the majority. You will not beat us. You will not win.
We're not gonna take it. No, we ain't gonna take it. Oh, we're not gonna take it anymore.
Well, that's the hope anyway. The hope is that we wake up and come November 4th, we start showing some of these governors across the country the door, especially the one we've got here in Pennsylvania after all the failures that we've seen the last 3.5 years. Be good for a change to have someone who actually thinks that we should be funding public education and that the commons, things that we the people own, should belong to, I don't know, we the people. Just a thought. But look, Corbett, like his entire class of 2010 governor thieves, he's just playing along with the playbook. And here to talk a little bit about their latest really great piece of work, this investigative reporting on the preying that is going on and the ripoff of what is ours. I've got Mary Bottari. She is with the Progressive magazine. She's investigative editor and also with the Center for Media and Democracy. I will get it out if it kills me. Mary, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having us.
I look at this and great great report. And if anyone wants to take a look at it, you can go to thericksmithshow.com, click on Mary's name, and it'll take you there. Pointing out the fact that a lot of these governors from Florida to Kansas to Ohio and Michigan and to right here in Pennsylvania, we've seen just basically the wholesale auctioning or giving away of what is ours.
Yep, that's for sure. You know, at the Center for Media and Democracy, we released the ALEC Exposed investigation a number of years ago that showed that the American Legislative Exchange Council was working behind the scenes to advance the same sort of anti-union, anti-worker, anti-wage, anti-healthcare agenda across the nation all at the same time. And we did an update. This is sort of an update on the privatization agenda. So ALEC is a big backer of privatizing everything, you know, waters, planes, trains, automobiles, you know, public services, foster care, child care. They're really a big backer of sort of pushing the envelope of privatization. So we looked at 7 states and 7 governors and how their ALEC-aligned privatization efforts went, and the picture is pretty ugly.
And as I said back in 2011 when we came out to Wisconsin and we slept in the Capitol there, as Scott Walker was the first governor to begin the ALEC playbook, I kept saying, look, all of the stuff, all this stuff going on here in Wisconsin is going to sweep across the country and it's going to make its way to Pennsylvania. And, you know, I hate being right, but I was right.
You were right, Governor Corbett. And one of the snapshots we looked at in Pennsylvania, because we can't do everything. I mean, these guys tried a lot of things in a lot of states. But we looked at Governor Corbett's $32 million of outsourced legal contracts from the state. So, you know, the state of Pennsylvania has a perfectly fine Department of Justice. It handles a large caseload, and it probably does a fairly good job. But he outsourced a whole bunch of legal cases to big Pennsylvania law firms who, you will be shocked to hear, were major contributors to his campaign. And they outsourced some $32 million. There's a little chart about who they are and how much they gave to the governor over a period of time. And you were just saying he was hot to trot on liquor sale privatization. They did that in Ohio. Governor Kasich privatized the state's entire economic development function, and then decided to fund it by privatizing the liquor sales and somehow using that money to fund the privatized agency that's supposed to be creating jobs in that state. But the whole thing is cloaked in secrecy because he exempted his economic development agency from open records. So we don't really know how much money's going in, going out, and what kind of jobs they're creating with that money. We really don't know what's going on over there, but they're not doing too well on the jobs front either.
Trust us. We wouldn't do anything wrong.
That's right.
And, bringing back to our governor, with the whole liquor privatization, the millions and millions of dollars that we wasted on litigation and hearings and advertising and all of the stuff that went into it. And then you throw on top of that, they attempted to privatize the management of the lottery, where they spent millions of dollars of taxpayer dollars to go after privatizing that. And, you look at this stuff and you go, how is this going to benefit us? What about the jobs that you kept talking about you were going to create? Here in this state, we went from 7th in job creation down to 49th. It's no wonder he's down 20 points in the recent polling.
Yep. In some states, sometimes when we talk about liquor privatization, people aren't so, concerned about that. But in some states, they're privatizing foster care services and adoption services and services to really vulnerable populations. One of the stories that just broke recently out of Florida is that Governor Rick Scott privatized prison health care services, and it instantly led to a 30-year spike in prison deaths. I mean, it was a very quick. Wow. It was only a few months later when prisoners started dying in droves. And, I posted a piece on this at the Huffington Post, and I got some pretty cold-hearted comments from some Republicans. Well, those people are in prison. They must be evil. Let's let them die. I mean, you cannot, a civilized country does not treat prisoners or children or foster care families or moms, as experiments in some sort of privatization agenda. These are real people. Because you've been sent to prison doesn't mean for, making a mistake or doing something awful doesn't mean you're meant to die of cancer, because nobody gives a hoot.
Yeah, I can't. When I hear that stuff, and I did read your piece, and it was fantastic. In fact, we've got it linked at thericksmithshow.com. I think we're a Christian nation, Mary.
I'm shocked sometimes at people's cold-heartedness on some of these issues. It's not even clear that contract is saving the state of Florida any money.
No, it's not. It's about campaign donations. And what gets me is how little it costs. I mean, you look at the lobbying that goes into some of these things. And I look at Michigan, for instance, and you talked about the prison food, the food service. They spent, I forget how many hundreds of thousands of dollars it was, but they spent a couple $100,000 in lobbying, and they got a $150 million contract. How do I get that kind of return on investment?
Yeah, not a bad deal. They spent $570,000 lobbying, and they got a $145 million contract, and they're doing such a great deal of it. There's maggots in the food in prisons of Michigan, and there was allegations of sexual behavior between the prisoners and the contractors. There's allegations of drug smuggling between the prisoners and the contractors, and if all of that wasn't bad enough, and they got fined by the state multiple times for this, there are new allegations last week of a murder for hire plot coming out of Michigan, where the contract workers are like talking to the inmates going, "Hey man, could you take care of a friend of mine?" And so, I mean, if that's not a complete failure of privatization, I don't know what is.
Wow.
But that governor is standing by that contract, and he said, as late as last week, I believe in working with people before throwing them out, as if.
You mean like the workers? You mean like the workers when they rammed right to work through in a lame duck session?
I know.
Yeah, he was working with them there.
Well, like Aramark is a person, the Aramark is the contractor.
And there's the other part of it. But you got to understand, Mary.
I hate to beat up a Philadelphia firm. Sorry about that.
No, but these are folks who believe that corporations are people.
I know. So anyways, it's just across the country, these privatizations have led to like scorching headline after scorching headline, and these governors just don't seem to care. They just keep going on and trying to privatize this, that, and the other thing. In Kansas, Governor Brownback just outsourced the entire child support collection system to a campaign donor. He's like, "Here, have it. What are you doing Tuesday?" And in Wisconsin, Governor Walker, he's the chairman of the board of a new privatized economic development agency that's completely failing to create the jobs that are promised, and they're completely failing to report true jobs numbers to the legislature.
Well, why should they have to?
So they created a whole new term. They're required by law to report expected jobs versus actual jobs. That seems to make sense. You cut a deal with a company, you're going to give them a big loan. You expect them to create 500 jobs. They're supposed to report the actual jobs that they created later, a year later or 2 years later, or whenever the contract says. The new Wisconsin Jobs Agency created a new term that you'll really like. It's called impacted jobs, and nobody knows what that means. So they told the legislature that they had created 37,000. They had 37,000 impacted jobs.
We've got
27,000 impacted jobs.
Yes, we have that here. We have that here in Pennsylvania.
Oh, you have impacted?
Yes, because we have the more jobs governor here. According to him, because he doesn't tax the drillers, and they're basically just letting these drilling companies, take the gas out from under our feet and profit wildly. He claims that by letting them do that, not taxing them, that it's impacted, all these 220,000 jobs, I think he came up with. Garbage collection in Philadelphia, where there is no Marcellus shale gas, but according to him, somehow that created that job. Sewer work in Philadelphia, truck drivers in Philadelphia, all of these jobs that were impacted, according to him, because of the gas, which is very creative. And if I actually gave him credit for something creative, you're telling me that it probably wasn't him then.
I'm going to have to look at who had it first. These ideas spread like wildfire. But the fact of the matter
I would argue, Mary, neither of them had the original thought. It was handed to them in, this is the book, follow it.
Yep, I think that's right. From the ALEC playbook or some such organization. And funny thing is, in Wisconsin, is that we took a really hard look at the jobs numbers in their own state database, and we found that when they were claiming like 27,000 jobs, they actually created 1,000 jobs. You know,
1,027.
That's how big the difference was in their own database.
Well, again, you go back to the Corbett was running around saying 220,000 jobs created because of the Marcellus Shale. The number was actually about 7,000, and then they started looking at those were people hired. So if you had 1,000 jobs and you hired 7 people, if you hired somebody and they quit, I hired somebody and they quit, hired somebody and they quit, they counted that as 3 jobs.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that's really not 3 jobs. It's one job that 3 people held. Which is interesting. My favorite part of your report, though, and I always love the governor of Maine. And again, if you want to read the report, Pay to Pray, governors facilitate the predatory outsourcing of America's public services. My favorite part of it was Paul LePage. Evidently, they took a retread. They had Gary Alexander, a retread here from Pennsylvania, because he was the former former secretary of public welfare here. But you had the Gary Alexander up there in Maine, who left here in Pennsylvania, just a little side note, left here back in February of 2013, his $143,000 a year job for Arkansas, where he got a 4-month gig to be a consultant for $220,000 a year for 4 months. And the Corbett administration said he was pursuing private sector opportunities.
Yep. So he hired good old Gary Alexander, had him come up to Maine, and, you know, they both shared this privatization agenda. They both wanted to privatize Medicaid. And, you know, those types of privatizations of healthcare services, those are the most concerning to me. The social service, the healthcare services, the vulnerable population services are really some of the most concerning ones. So, LePage was convinced that privatization of healthcare was the way to go, and he paid Gary Alexander some. It was a no-bid contract for $1 million. Okay, and then he got a report that had completely plagiarized sections to it, and it's something like he's supposed to do a series of reports, and something about something like $500,000 went out the door for these reports before the Maine legislature finally put a halt to the whole thing. And so I don't think that they're going to be able to recoup that money, but I hope someone in Maine is looking at that.
Yeah, I hope so. And there's part of me that goes, at some point, don't we have to look at the Rick Scotts and the healthcare situation and the privatization there and in Michigan and here, and start looking at maybe some criminal charges? Because on some level, this is a crime against the taxpayer, at least there, but a crime against common sense.
Yeah, when we look at Florida, that shows some real chutzpah. You know, Rick Scott was the millionaire that swept into office using all his own money. And one of the first bills he tried to pass involved drug testing of state employees, drug testing of welfare recipients. And the people pointed out that it would benefit his drug testing firm, and maybe this wasn't so cool for a governor to be doing. So he said, okay. And he decided to hand over all his investments to a blind trust, which promptly bought a whole bunch of healthcare stocks and other investments. And then he started privatizing healthcare. And so he succeeded in privatizing aspects of the Medicaid system down there. So we're not really sure, because it's a blind trust, how much he's profiting off of this situation. But the companies involved, their profits are skyrocketing. They're not skyrocketing. They're benefiting from the privatization in Florida and other states, and they're also benefiting nationally from some of the healthcare policies that are going on now. So that was a real interesting case study.
Yeah, and let's finish up, because I want people to actually go and read the report, which I think is fascinating and really very telling. Again, if you want to read it, go to thericksmithshow.com. Just click on Mary's name. It's right there. Pay to Pray is the name of the study. Let's finish up in Maine. Evidently, LePage privatized a good portion of the water and let Nestle, one of the world's biggest water companies, pump almost as much as they wanted out of the ground.
Nestle owns Poland Springs and loves Maine water, so it wants to pump more and more and more water. Well, some people on the PUC and elsewhere raised concerns about this, and anybody who raised concerns was replaced. And now LePage has a board on the PUC that he's really going to enjoy. He's really going to use to try and ram some changes through to give Nestle whatever it wants. So that section we called privatizing public water for private gain. And it's not just social services. It's not just the services we think of. It even applies to water, which is certainly, as you said, part of our commons. It certainly deserves to be under public control. And yet we have these private companies pushing for private control in even states like California, where water is so scarce.
Yeah, it's insane to me. And the sad thing is I don't think the average everyday person gets it. I don't think that they're paying attention to what's being stolen from us, right out from under our nose and auctioned off at almost. And I guess how little we get for these things is, I guess, what is really shocking to me.
Yeah, sometimes these contracts are really, really raw deals, and sometimes they're multi-year contracts. So, a lot of this started in Indiana a number of years ago. They sold their toll road. Well, right before we released our report, that 75-year deal went bankrupt. And so that toll road will now be sold to another private entity who probably won't be able to do a better job managing a road. Certain things that are built for the public good. Eisenhower built the U.S. road system to lift all our boats, not for certain companies to chop up and privatize and charge us high fees. Certain things like roads, like water, social services for vulnerable populations, these things should never be privatized.
I'm with you. Same thing with education. And the one thing all of the governors on your list had in common is this whole push towards Education Incorporated and all of their push for charter schools.
Yeah, K-12 Inc., believe it or not, it's a company. And you guys know it because of the Agora Charter School in your neck of the woods. I mean, the companies that are involved in these schools have been just racked with scandal over and over again, state by state, and they're doing a terrible job educating kids.
Yep. Every time I hear one of the radio ads on the radio, I go, there goes, I'll say to my kids, there goes your education. There went a dollar that was supposed to go in your classroom that didn't make it.
And, in Wisconsin, we just released a list of failed charter schools. Kids go to these schools for years. They're totally, some of them, not all of them, but some of them are total sort of con jobs. You go there for 5 years and you don't learn anything. I mean, how does that affect a kid's life? I mean, it's a very dangerous game we play when we start handing off pieces of the public trust to private companies who really have only one concern, and that's their bottom line.
Yeah. Well, when you're talking about, the Education Incorporated, they're tied in with Prison Incorporated. So if you don't teach the kids anything, they're perfect fodder for the prisons because you got to put heads in beds. And then what's the best way of doing that? Making sure the kids don't have an education and they fall into the life of crime, and bang, we got customers.
Well, that's an interesting theory. I'll have to look into that one a little bit more closely.
That is my theory, and you can have it. I pass it along for free. Mary, it's always great talking to you. I appreciate the work you guys do there at the Center for Media and Democracy and Alec Exposed and PR Watch and all of that. You guys do an excellent job.
Well, thank you, Rick. We'll talk soon, okay?
All right. Thanks so much, Mary Bottari. Again, if you want to check out the really great report, Pay to Pray, just go to thericksmithshow.com, click on Mary's name. Take you right there. Quick break, right back. Stick around.
Together, we can make America better. The Rick Smith Show.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is your World in 2. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service. Once a year, the 193 members of the UN General Assembly meet in New York to select 5 countries to serve on the UN Security Council. Much of the drama of the process has been stripped away, with continental groups deciding well in advance who will be nominated. But this year, after Angola, Malaysia, New Zealand, and Venezuela coasted through a first round of votes, 2 countries remain to contest the final seat, Spain and Turkey. It took 3 rounds of voting for one of them to earn a necessary 2/3 majority.
Spain, 132. Turkey, 60.
Both Spain and Turkey have served on the council before, but Turkey's defeat stings as the country attempts to highlight its geopolitical relevance. Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu traveled to New York to drum up support and participate in today's vote, but his presence wasn't enough to tip the scales. Turkey is deeply affected by both the Syrian civil war and the current campaign against the Islamic State, but Ankara's decision earlier this week to bomb Kurdish PKK militants within its own borders, instead of assisting the Kurdish defenders across the border in Kobani, appeared to dampen the country's diplomatic standing. After Venezuela's election to the council, its foreign minister, Rafael Ramirez, dedicated the victory to Commander Hugo Chavez, saying the country's recognition was a sign of global support for its program of social justice. The United States was unconvinced. In an unusually pointed statement, Ambassador Samantha Power alleged that, quote, Venezuela's conduct at the UN has run counter to the spirit of the UN Charter, and its violations of human rights at home are at odds with the Charter's letter. The 5 new members of the Security Council will begin their 2-year terms in January. For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
We've been talking about our 5 presidents who served as such without ever winning election to the office. The most unique was Gerald Ford. The previous 4 had all at least been elected vice president, but Ford was handpicked by President Richard Nixon after Nixon's VP resigned. Eventually, Nixon resigned himself, leaving Ford to take the presidency without ever having run for national office. After serving out Nixon's term, however, Ford did campaign for president in his own right, but lost. Our country had gone through 51 years and its first 8 presidents before John Tyler became the first to step into a vacancy. The first 4 vice presidents to ascend to the presidency all did so between 1841 and 1881. But it was 93 years and 17 presidents later before Gerald Ford became the most recent vice president to step up to the Oval Office. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
We make Pennsylvania happen!
The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
$25 bill now, $30, $30, will you give me 30, make it 30, bid, mama, $30, will you give me 30, who'll bid a $30 bill? $30 bill now, 35, will you give me 35 to make it 35, a bid of 35, who would have bid it at a $35 bid?
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. Pat points out that what we have privatized in the state and what we've attempted to privatize, she says, has not benefited we the people. There's nothing that we've privatized that has benefited we the people. And when will we wake up and realize that our assets are being stolen from us? And I couldn't have said it better myself, Pat, because the reality is I've been on the air, going on 10 years now. And I've asked the very simple question, what is it that we've privatized that has worked out better for us, for we the people, that has been cheaper, more efficient, a better product, good for the community, good for workers. What have we done? And the answer is nothing. You can look at every one of the privatization schemes that have popped up, and you can go, there are winners, and those winners are usually very highly politically connected, and there are losers, and those are the people who are the workers. And every one of these situations that they point out in this report, pay to pray, governors facilitate the predatory outsourcing of America's public services, every one of them, tied to campaign contributions, tied to privilege, tied to access. And all of it comes back to education, healthcare, all of the industries that we rely on that I don't think should be privatized, that I don't think should be profitized. The story about the guy in Florida outsourcing the prison healthcare. And if you remember, we had talked a couple of years ago to nurses who they were about to privatize all the nurses going into these prisons. And outside of the safety concerns for the nurses, really the temp nurses that would be coming in and out, was the care for the prisoners. The reality is you're looking for minimum wage nurses. What kind of care are you going to get? But as I read through this report, I'm literally shocked at how little it is that they spend on lobbying, and how little how little it costs to get these contracts. You know, they spend a couple $100,000 on lobbying and whining and dining and you know, schmoozing and all of that, and some campaign contribution. Here's $1,000 check. And then bang, you get hundreds of millions of dollars in contracts. It's a struggle for me because, you know, I look at this and I go, at some point, don't we have to go, wait a minute, that's ours. And I still talk to people who go, you know, Rick, you know, when I heard the first thing I heard about the liquor privatization came out of your program. You said it's our asset. It's a valuable asset. It's something that pays hundreds of millions of dollars in taxes that we don't have to, year after year after year. Why would we want to privatize it? Why would we want to give it away? And I said that when the argument was we're going to get $6 billion for it. And I said, well, okay, let's say we get that $6 billion. Let's say that's even possible. You know, that's about it's about 10 years of funding. What are you going to do with it? If all you're going to do is hand it out, no good. If you could turn that into, you know, some activity, maybe, possibly, but you're not. But then you started to ask the question, where'd you come up with the number $6 billion? Because there were some people, and I got to be honest, even I said it's $6 billion. I don't know. It's a lot of money. Can you get it? And the answer was no. Almost immediately, they cut that in half, down to $3 billion. And then they said, oh, well, you know, no, maybe not that either. When someone actually goes, how'd you get $3 billion? Same place we got 6. We reached around behind us, got a good handful, and popped it right out of their keister. So then they go, well, okay, well, what's the real number? Well, 1.7 came up, if you remember, then $1.5 billion, then $1 billion, then 500 million. And then it was, well, we probably wouldn't even get that. But it's, if you remember, it's a core function of government. Just not right. We should get rid of it. And I keep going, wait a second, that's a major asset. Major asset. That pays taxes so that I don't have to, and that you don't have to. And that money goes into the general coffers, and we use it for things like, oh, I don't know, taking care of seniors and education. Then they want to privatize the management of the lottery. And we find out that the company that wanted to do it would have done a worse job, would have been more costly for them to manage it, and that we were going to give them a whole bunch of new games. Sure, go ahead, take Keno, even though we don't have it, and not even sure legally you can, but go ahead, yeah. And we spent millions of dollars on that. And it's no wonder that this governor's so far behind in the polls. I mean, is anyone else surprised? Because I'm not. But again, I go back to this, and I think you should really take a look at it. It's very interesting. And the part about how much money they're getting in campaign money and how much money they're spending on lobbying. Wow, the return on investment. I just ask, how can I get a gig like that? Quick break, right back.
There's a flaw in the the system, and the fly in the ointment's gonna bring the whole thing down. Floodgates are open, we've let the demons loose. The big guns have spoken, and we've fallen for the ruse.
Climate change is in large part due to human activity.
Paul Ryan backs away, sort of, from outright climate science denial.
You see some change of tone even from those who have been aggressive climate change deniers.
We may have reached peak climate change denial.
Natural gas, if extracted safely, it's the bridge fuel that can power our economy with less of the carbon pollution that causes climate change.
Turns out natural gas isn't a bridge fuel to a low emissions future. Plus, did a U.S. defense contractor really invent a compact nuclear fusion reactor? Separating fact from fiction.
Because that's what we do. All of that and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comments.
From the intersection of politics and unmitigated corporate gall.
Hey, Rachel Maddow, don't give away our address on live TV. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, let me say before we begin that I am highly, highly dubious of the theories that you offered in the teaser that these right-wingers, Paul Ryan and other climate science deniers, are actually backing off of their climate science denial.
I would call it more like tricky waffling, if anything.
Yeah, at best.
Well, we'll get to that in a moment. But first, you may have heard the big splash this week that aerospace and defense giant Lockheed Martin made with a press release claiming that their research team had achieved the holy grail of nuclear energy, a breakthrough in nuclear fusion, promising small and super cheap nuclear reactors the size of a pickup truck.
No, actually, I didn't hear that. Then again, I've been hiding in the basement with my Ebola hazmat suit on, so I don't really know much of what's going on at all.
Well, not to worry. It does look like nuclear scientists who are not employed by Lockheed Martin are pouring skepticism all over that press release, noting that it lacks technical details like actual results that can be independently verified and an actual working prototype. They say the press release appears to be just angling for more research money.
But what would this nuclear fusion device mean if it was for real?
It's perpetually 10 to 30 years in the future, but if it were for real, it would be a small nuclear reactor that would have very little nuclear waste and would hopefully be a lot cheaper and quicker to construct.
And safer, right? Because nuclear fusion is different than the nuclear fission that we have in our current nuclear reactors.
Right.
But you remain skeptical.
As do most nuclear scientists, apparently.
Good for you and good for them.
Meanwhile, natural gas is not a bridge fuel that will help the U.S. transition to a low-emissions future, as President Obama has claimed. That's according to a new study published this week in the journal Nature. The study examines a lot of moving parts, including energy markets and future energy demand. But the basic upshot of this study is that even if natural gas drillers curbed their methane gas leaks, the surge in cheap, cleaner natural gas is actually increasing energy use and emissions in the U.S., which is offsetting emissions cuts from coal. And worse, investment in the fracking boom is displacing investment in renewable energy sources.
To give the context, a lot of environmentalists had pointed to natural gas, said, oh, it doesn't put off as much carbon, but in fact, it puts off a whole lot more methane, which is also a greenhouse gas. And now we're using more of it because we're producing so much more of it.
Yeah, that's right. Moving on to elections, we've been reporting how the corporate media has suddenly decided to ask candidates about climate change after thoroughly ignoring it for years. In general, Democratic candidates this cycle have walked a fine line of accepting climate science without alienating the fossil fuel industry. But it's getting really tricky for Republicans, where outright denial was a litmus test in the primaries, but is not helpful in the general election. Here's Wisconsin Republican Representative Paul Ryan, who outright denied global warming as a vice presidential candidate just 2 years ago. Now he's shifting to saying he doesn't know if humans are responsible in a debate this week.
I don't know the answer to that question, and I don't think science does either. Does climate change occur? Yeah. Yes, of course we have climate change. We've had climate change forever. Is human involvement involved? Yes, it is. what extent? I don't know.
Yeah, he doesn't know. The scientists know, but he ignores those scientists because, he's not a scientist, all of that.
It does look like the political tide may be turning against climate denial, at least according to the State Department's chief climate negotiator with the United Nations, Todd Stern.
I think we are moving toward a tipping point. We're not there yet, but it's coming, I think. You see some change of tone, even from those who have been aggressive climate change deniers. I doubt, actually, that even a year from now, whether major political candidates will consider it a viable strategy to deny the existence of climate change.
I think that Todd Stern of the U.S. State Department is a climate change denier. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. While you're there, please consider a donation to help the Green News Report stay on the air and help bradblog.com do all that we do. We really need your help. Find us and follow us on the Facebooks and the Twitter at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Dreamer, you know you are a dreamer. But can you put your hands in your head? Oh no, I said dreamer, nothing but a dreamer.
Standing up to conservatives and corporatists every weeknight. The Rick Smith Show.
So now you see the light. Hey, stand up for your right. Come on, get up, stand up. Stand up for your right. Get up, stand up. Don't give up the fight.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Yesterday, you saw, all across the country, you saw, people saying these home healthcare workers have launched their own Fight for 15 and a union campaign. And it's, this is one of those things that I've been saying. It's going to grow. It's going to be every group of workers who have been marginalized, who've been ripped off. It started with the fast food workers, the Walmart workers. Now you're seeing the home health care workers. All of these service sector jobs that we were told back in the 80s that we would transition to, that these would be middle-class jobs that you could support a family on. Don't need that dirty manufacturing anymore. No. Don't need that anymore. No, we can do these, these white-collar office, non-dirty jobs in the service sector. And that's so wonderful. Until you realize that, the service sector, most of them are minimum wage jobs, and they're honestly, they're difficult, backbreaking. And as I said, as we come out of this recovery, we're just following historical paths. We're not Magellan. We're not discovering new territories. This is how things have worked. And I said before, look, as the recovery happens and people have options, they're going to demand that their current situations get better, or they're going to leave, or they're going to take to the streets and demand. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing people saying, look, and that 15 number keeps popping up. So I do believe you're going to see a lot more businesses going, 1010, please, 1010. You're going to see a lot of people jumping on the 1010 bandwagon, and very soon. You've already seen, a number of McDonald's, I think, said that they were in favor of seeing the wages go up. I think that's a competitive thing to put the smaller ones out of business. But even still, they're saying, hey, we want that higher number. So with all of this push, and as I talked a little bit about yesterday, the myths that we've been constantly berated with, and the bombardment of it's a job killer, even though we've not found that to be true in the past. All of those are breaking down, and people are waking up going, that's kind of BS, and we know it's BS. So interesting. And we're going to, next week, we're going to try and talk to a couple of the fast food workers, a couple of the Walmart workers, and of course, look to get some of the home health care workers who are saying, look, we want $15 an hour and a voice on the job. Enough is enough. We've struggled. We've sacrificed because, hey, times were tough. We were told everybody's got to tighten their belt a little bit. Well, the tightening's over. And I agree. It's time. And you're seeing communities across the country who are doing this. I mean, you look at Seattle, who raised their minimum wage. You look at a number of other places who have gone after, New York, San Diego, I think, saw their minimum wage going up. You see a number of other places like Sunnyvale, California, who's, I guess just Tuesday, right? Tuesday, their city council approved a measure to raise the minimum wage to $10.30 an hour by 2015 and established a formal commitment to work with other neighboring communities to establish a regional minimum wage by 2018. And the number they're looking by 2018 is $15. Also, you got Minneapolis, who, was one of the 150 fast food cities where, people were out in the streets. Their city council evidently is looking at a proposal to raise the city's minimum wage to $15 an hour. Rahm Emanuel said yesterday, or I guess it was Wednesday, that he set this winter as a target to get the city's minimum wage up to $13 an hour by 2018 and on a path to eventually $15 an hour. So there's this push to kind of get in that direction of people saying, you know what, we'd like to make a decent wage, please. And, even on Wednesday, the guy who's the head of Walmart right now, he said that the company is going to gradually raise wages, trying to quell some of the support for it because, people are literally in the streets. And as I said, I think the only time things really change is when our corporate CEOs and our investor class fears that their head could be on a stick. So that's going to be interesting to me. And the guy who's the incoming chairman of the National Retail Federation, this Kip Tyndale, who was the CEO, I guess still is the CEO of the Container Store. And I didn't know this, but evidently at the Container Store, which I've never seen and I've never been to, their frontline workers make nearly $50,000 a year. And he's saying, look, he's going to use his position at the National Retail Federation to push for an increase in wages because he understands no one's going to buy my containers if they don't have any money. And this is where business has been a little short-sighted. If we don't have disposable income, nobody's buying their stuff. I think that's pretty simple, right? It's something we can get our heads around, right? I think so. Quick break. Right back.
Fighting till the end. And we're not gonna break tonight, and we're not gonna bend. Some say the union's down, but I asked around, and everybody said, this is a union town, all down the line. This is a union town, all down the line. And if they come to strip our rights away, we'll give them hell every time. This is a union town, all down the line.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg.
Okay, that's it. No more Mr. Nice Guy from me. The avarice of corporate power has now turned personal. It's about beer, the nourishing nectar of a civilized society. Since my teen years, I've done extensive and intensive consumer research on the brewer's art, from the full array of ales to the most substantial of stouts. I weathered the depressing era when Budweiser, Miller, and a couple of other nationalizers of bland beer drove a diversity of livelier regional brands out of business. But then I rejoiced in the last decade or so as a flowering of craft and microbrews has spread from city to city, creating an abundance of real gusto and local flavor from coast to coast. But beware, ye who love local beer, do not just sit on your duffs doing 12-ounce elbow bends, for here comes the big brew bastards again, bigger and more menacing than ever. In fact, they've gone global, wielding their predatory marketing clout and political muscle to rule beer world once and for all. SAB Miller, now a South African conglomerate, is trying to take over Heineken, the world's third largest beer maker. But Anheuser-Busch, now owned by a Belgian-Brazilian monopolist called InBev, is trying to buy SAB Miller, creating a single behemoth that would control a third of all beer sales in the world. In our US of A, the monopolization is worse, with InBev and SAB Miller effectively controlling 3/4 of our beer market. If InBev swallows SAB Miller, we're looking at higher prices, lower quality, and few choices. This is Jim Hightower saying, meanwhile, the red, white, and blue icon of American beer, Pabst Blue Ribbon, which dates back to 1844 and itself is a merged conglomerate that owns Colt 45, Old Milwaukee, and Schlitz, is being bought by a Russian. Where is Teddy Roosevelt when we really need him?
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's populist take on what the powers that be are up to. Find out more at hightowerlowdown.org.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
One of these days I'm gonna blow my top, and that sucker, he's gonna pay. Lord, I can't wait to see their faces when I get the nerve to say, take this job and shove it. I ain't working here no more. A woman done left, took all the reason I was working for.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. Instead of saying, take the job and shove it, how about take these conditions and this crummy pay and shove that? We're going to make it better, and we're staying. We're going to make it worse for you. We're going to make you miserable for a change. And that's kind of what you're seeing going on across the country as organizing is beginning to happen. And I look, yesterday we talked about in Philadelphia that FedEx Freight has, and look, I think the FedEx model is really coming. People are finally waking up to the reality that they've had a competitive advantage for so long based on screwing their workforce that finally the workers are saying, no, I don't think so. Not anymore. And you look at another division of FedEx's, the ground division, and you know this was the originally this was roadway package service. It was the UPS beater. Evidently, the people who started UPS decided they were going to go over and create this other company, this RPS, which didn't do well. And when they sold off roadway services, when they cut off Roadway Express to die because it was a union carrier, and they cut off Viking and Coles and Spartan and all of those other LTL carriers along with RPS, they split that all off, figuring that the union company would die. Oddly enough, the union company actually thrived in the years to follow the spinoff, where the other companies, the Vikings, the Spartan, the Coles, you don't see them on the road because they died fairly quickly. And then FedEx bought up RPS because you can only use trailer tape on planes for so long. And FedEx bought it up and then continued that model that they had perfected, to be honest. And what you got was a company of independent contractors. And what the article over at Bloomberg News points out, Josh Idelson, who we've had on this program a number of times, he says this guy who's worked for FedEx Ground for 10 years, first started work for RPS, and then when RPS got bought out, he worked for FedEx. He said the company had the strictest standards for delivery times. Had the strictest standards for driver grooming, truck maintenance, and deadlines for their paperwork to be handed in. Also, they deducted money from the worker's paycheck to cover the cost of uniforms and truck washings and scanner equipment and all of this stuff that gave really them the competitive advantage. Now, of course, the workers at FedEx Ground, they never get paid overtime because they're not considered employees by the company. I would argue that they are. Also, FedEx Ground never contributed a dime to Social Security. And this is something where every worker in this country should be really ticked off because they're not contributing to Social Security. And if Social Security has this big problem, which there's a small problem, That if we do some mild changes now, we'll make it solvent on into the distant future. These are free riders. These are people who are cheating the system. And what's interesting is, FedEx got away with it because they claim these guys are independent contractors, not employees. Now, according to the guy cited in the article, he was making about $90,000 a year working for FedEx Ground. And you go, wow, $90,000 a year. And I love my truck driver friends who say, I make $200,000 a year. And you go, well, how much do you pay out in tolls and costs and everything else? According to him, he pays about 60% and deductions for uniforms and scanners and truck stuff and all that stuff. So out of $90,000, you're not getting $90,000. You're getting a little over 30. If 60% of it goes away, you get a little over 30. Now, as the article points out, FedEx, the ground business, has always been in independent contractor mode, which, according to the company's statement, it's helped them to differentiate them from their competition. They say, quote, the business model has been highly successful and beneficial to customers, contractors, and FedEx Ground. Well, of course, it's going to be beneficial to the company to not have to pay all of the things that go into what it costs to hire someone. You think about all of the stuff that they don't pay. Actually gives them about a 30% competitive advantage because they say about 30% of their payroll is cut by not having to pay payroll tax, not having to pay unemployment insurance, not having to pay workers' compensation, not having to pay state taxes. So no Medicare, no Social Security, none of that stuff. And you go, of course they've got an advantage. But why aren't they any cheaper than FedEx, or why isn't FedEx any cheaper than UPS or the Postal Service? Well, because their profits are so much higher. And you look at this and you go, wow, this is a massive redistribution of wealth from working people who should be making decent wages and benefits and being paid Social Security and into Medicare and into unemployment and into workers' comp and all of these things that benefit all working people. These are the free riders. And I've been saying this for years, and yet finally, and I'm glad somebody's doing this, that we're waking up to the reality that it's screwing us to allow to have these free riders. Now, the woman who's the plaintiff's attorney in California, this Beth Ross, she says, as FedEx's counsel acknowledged at oral argument, the company carefully structures its drivers' operating agreements so that it could label the drivers as independent contractors to gain a competitive advantage, i.e., to avoid the additional costs associated with employees. And you go, yeah, I think we knew that. Because you do realize that label, you're going to be your own boss. You're an independent contractor. You're on your own. They aren't covered by wage and hour laws. So no Fair Labor Standard Act, no overtime, no maximum hour laws, no minimum wage, none of that. None of that. They have no safety oversight because you're the boss, you're the company, you're the person responsible for your own safety. This is that liberty of contract thing. Also, you got to pay for your own uniforms, your own truck maintenance, your own equipment. So all of that stuff is shouldered by the person at the bottom. The company gets to go back. Good, bye. That's your problem. And you also don't have the right to unionize. You don't have the right to, civil rights protections, EEOC. You can be sexually harassed or discriminated against because, hey, you're your own boss. Welcome to business, son. And it kind of, at some point, I'm hoping the light bulb's going on with people who aren't associated with independent contractor status, that you have to understand it's harming us all. By allowing this kind of a situation to exist, you're pulling everyone else down. You're making conditions terrible for everyone else. And this has always been my problem with these kind of scenarios. You're giving this one group because because they're able to cheat, you're giving them the advantage. Now, their competition either has to figure out how to cheat or they go out of business. And that's, to me, just a real problem. So it'll be interesting to see where this goes as we're seeing it working through the court systems as we speak. The hope is that our courts haven't completely lost their mind as they've had in the past. Quick break, right back. Stick around.
And he said I was once like you, and I used to protest too. But the powers that be are too great, so walk away from the rebel faith.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. Golden Gate Bridge Labor Coalition workers planned to strike Friday, barring any last-minute labor contract settlement. Bus drivers say they will honor picket lines if a strike happens. The unions, representing 450 workers, were in a bargaining session with the Golden Gate Bridge District on Thursday. The Golden Gate Labor Coalition's Alex Tonneson.
We definitely don't like the fact that we're going to impact commuters in a negative way, and no one wants to do this. But, it comes down to if the district doesn't want to come to a reasonable agreement, then we have no other choice, and this is kind of the last resort.
The district wants to increase health insurance costs for workers, while the unions want no health care cost increases. The unions say they have fallen 12% behind the Bay Area cost of living, so they want 4% raises in each year of the 3-year contract. Philadelphia teachers and their supporters rallied Thursday to protest the elimination of the teachers' collective bargaining contract. Philadelphia Federation of Teachers Vice President Arlene Kempen says the district threw out the labor contract to try to solve a funding crisis on the backs of teachers.
That's just something that we weren't responsible for creating, and we're not going to let them do it. Our members have been the glue that's been holding the schools together. We did not have anything to do with the mismanagement of whatever monies they did have.
New York elected officials joined low-wage workers Thursday in New York City to condemn Walmart's impact on low-wage workers and their communities. Walmart hasn't opened any stores in New York City, but the Walmart model is being followed in many jobs across the city's 5 boroughs, according to a new report called Low-Wage Rage: How Walmart and the Walton Family Harm New York City's Workforce. The New York City action was part of a national day of action protesting Walmart and the Walton family. A statement from Chicago Teachers Union President Karen Lewis thanked well-wishers and told them she looks forward to rejoining them again on the battlefield. Lewis underwent surgery this week for a cancerous brain tumor after dropping out of contention for the Chicago mayor's race. The Pennsylvania State Senate this week defeated an anti-union bill that would have ended automatic dues collections and political contributions from union public school workers. 6 Republican senators joined Democrats to defeat it. Organized labor in Pennsylvania says this was part of a broader Republican attack on unions and collective bargaining rights. The Rhode Island AFL-CIO is endorsing a Republican for the first time in 3 decades. Catherine Taylor, the Republican candidate for lieutenant governor, got the endorsement this week. Rhode Island AFL-CIO President George Nee issued a statement saying Taylor's understanding of the many challenges everyday Rhode Islanders face and her track record of listening to concerns of her employees at the Division of Elderly Affairs made her the right choice for the labor endorsement. Taylor's opponent, Democrat Daniel McKee, supports charter schools, and that was cited by the state AFL-CIO as one reason he didn't get its endorsement. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
We all know that certain people who make it a practice to depreciate the accomplishments of labor, who even attack labor as unpatriotic, they keep this business up, usually for 3 years and 6 months in a row. But then, for some strange reason, they change their tune every 4 years, just before Election Day. When votes are at stake, they suddenly discover that they really love labor. And that they are anxious to protect labor from its old friends.
Little bit more you always need.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. You know, that's how I guess it used to be. Republicans actually used to care about workers at some point, even to the point where just before election time, they would feign, they would, we care, trust us. I think they've given that up. They realize that the gig's up. We realize they don't give a rat's behind, and maybe they don't even try, which has been interesting about some of the things on the campaign trail. I came across this really funny story over at BuzzFeed. And I think I actually got this campaign flyer from Governor Corbett that was all photoshopped. And we've talked about this before. The governor, anytime he needs a black person in his shot, they Photoshop someone in. Well, they did it again. In fact, what they said is, the campaign website that they got is pretty much all stock images that I guess nobody really wants to be around him. Kind of funny, though. Again, another reason why I think he's down 20 points. Anyway, here to talk about what's going on the campaign trail and maybe some of the funny things here in the 2014 election cycle. I've got Bill Scher from the Campaign for America's Future. Bill, thanks for taking time for us.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me back.
So, I came in with the FDR clip for a reason. I mean, the Republicans used to, at least before election time, try and pander to workers. Now, not so much, not at all. In fact, you got one running around saying, I'm proud of my outsourcing record.
Well, that's David Perdue in Georgia. You think the Republicans would learn a lesson after they nominated a private equity CEO for president in 2012. Who was ranting about the 47%, you might think that they would go a different direction for some of their nominees this time around. But at least in Georgia, look, this guy in Georgia, David Perdue, he was CEO of a textile company. He was given a deposition 9 years ago, and he was being asked about his outsourcing as part of that deposition. And he said, yeah, I spent my whole career doing that. Now that's embarrassing for a political candidate. Well, the guy it was 9 years ago. He wasn't running for office. He had no idea that his quote would be used in this way. Maybe he would have phrased it differently and not so glibly. Give him a chance to explain himself. Maybe he would say, you know what, that was my career 9 years ago. When you're a CEO, you really don't have you don't get the dual things you would like to do to keep a business afloat. We need better policies so CEOs don't have to be put in that situation, and I hear the policies that I would use. No, he doesn't say that. He says, defend it. I'm proud of it. I'm quoting the man on camera in front of reporters. And it's a gift to Michelle Nunn, the Democrat in that state. And, so the polls indicate there might maybe been a 4-point shift based on that alone, putting Michelle Nunn in the lead. And Republicans are in a pretty good shape nationwide as far as the Senate is concerned, but blowing it in Georgia and a couple other states that should be gimmies to them might undermine their chance for actually taking over the Senate.
Well, I mean, this is another one of those cases where honesty bit them in the behind, because, I truly believe they want to come out and say, yeah, I'm proud of the fact that I did this. And I'm proud of the fact that I'm not one of the 47%. I really believe they want to, from the highest mountains, scream the things they've been whispering to each other in the back rooms of their country clubs and their private clubs. I truly believe that.
There's a guy in Connecticut, running for governor, Tom Foley, who, when he was a CEO, he drove a company into bankruptcy, another private equity type guy, and he was going to a paper mill that was shutting down in Connecticut, and he was going to go there to blame the current governor for it. But the local Democratic politicians showed up, and so the workers from that plant showed up, reminding him of his business record. And he responds by saying, you failed, to the local politicians and the workers there. You failed. You're the reason why this plant closed. Don't blame management that was far away, because it was a private equity company from afar that shut down. Don't blame the management that's far away. It's your fault. These guys have it sort of in their DNA that managerial executive know-how should never be questioned. Right. We have more information than you guys do, so don't challenge us when it comes to business sense. As opposed to a guy like in your state, Pennsylvania, Tom Wolf, he is the CEO too, but he's running on his record investing in his workers. I pay my workers a living wage. I give them good benefits. I make sure they make 20-30% of the profits that could go to them. why Republicans can't find guys like that. Even they're going to mouth the words. I understand they don't find CEOs who want to make a point of treating your workers well and not treating them as if they're chump change.
Yeah, and I think there's a God complex that goes along, as you've pointed out. We know, don't ask us, and the reason it's your fault is because, well, you wanted to make that at least that minimum wage.
Right. I mean, anything that involves workers demanding what they deserve needs to be snuffed out. You still see some folks that I think Republicans in a lot of cases are not running as crudely as they have in the past. We're talking about some of the more extreme examples here, but Cory Gardner in Colorado, he's been hewing to the center a lot. Dan Sullivan in Alaska, these guys are trying not to make the same mistakes as a Christine O'Donnell or a Todd Aiken. But every so often, they can't help themselves. We have Scott Walker saying that minimum wage doesn't help anybody, and you just should. Minimum wage that's been sort of an accepted compact in this country for 70 years across party lines. Nearly everybody in America believes that there is a basic minimum that a worker deserves for showing up to work and doing his or her job. And when Republicans resist that and challenge that, they signal to the public, we are not mainstream people, and we're going to do something radical that you're not going to like if you're elected in office.
Well, I mean, why don't we just already know that on a visceral level? I mean, that's surprising. It's surprising to me that we don't automatically think that when you see Republican CEO. I mean, haven't we learned that lesson enough?
You would think that lesson would be internalized by now, but these guys have this libertarian mindset that any kind of government action is sort of distorting of the perfect market.
Yeah.
Let's let nature take its course, and whatever I, as a CEO, offer you that you're willing to accept, I'm sure that's going to be a good enough number. You wouldn't take the job if I wasn't offering you a good enough wage, and so just let the market do its thing. And if the market says you earn $3 an hour, then you'll just have the gumption to go take on 2 or 3 more jobs, and that's the way the market can work. And that's just not what most people believe. And I think that until they recalibrate to their more extreme positions, they're going to have a hard time being accepted as a governing majority party.
Yeah, I just gave a presentation to the local teacher retiree group where I talked just about that and this whole movement. Because there are the person said, are they pushing us back to the days before unions were legal? And I said, no, it's even before that. I mean, they want us to go back to the Lochner era, where liberty of contract disallowed any intrusion, any maximum hour law, any minimum wage, any child labor, any safety laws. They wanted to where if you're desperate enough to go into a horrible condition for no money, then by God, you should be allowed, and you should take everybody else with you if desperation's that bad.
That is what a lot of them deep down believe. Now, I think there are certain cases. I mentioned Dan Sullivan in Alaska. Tom Cotton in Arkansas was very right wing. But in those states, there's a ballot initiative trying to raise the minimum wages in their states, and while these guys still won't accept a federal increase in the minimum wage,
right,
they are being savvy enough to muddy the water and say, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna vote for the increase here at home." But they can't then make the next step and say, "Well, why is $8.25 good for Arkansas, but higher than $7.25 isn't good for America?" It's not like Arkansas is one of your higher cost of living states, but they just don't want to do anything that's going to make a Democratic proposal look good, but they've at least got enough horse sense to say, I'm not going to fight it at home. And that's what some of these guys, that's what Republicans might win the Senate, because the cases of Republicans not falling off the right-wing cliff and finding some way to stand out the rough edges or blur the ideological lines, throw up a lot of smoke and dust, those guys might actually win. The guys who let too much show, the guys are going to lose.
Yeah, I mean, I look at this, and there's just some real insanity out there. Have you seen these the dress ads? I mean, I think Rick Scott had one in Florida. They put one out here in Pennsylvania for Tom Corbett about a wedding dress, and would you wear the Tom Corbett dress or the Tom Wolfe dress? Did you see these?
Oh, I wrote about this actually for an article at Real Clear Politics a week ago, because it was another example of some of the real ham-handed outreach to women that Republicans have tried to do. They're acutely aware that they have a huge gender gap problem, particularly with unmarried women. And if they don't solve that, you have in North Carolina, Kay Hagan, the incumbent Democratic senator, was thought to be a goner, but there's a massive gender gap in that race that has been giving her, a small but stable lead throughout the whole course of the cycle. So they're trying very hard to figure out how to solve that problem, but with ads that say, "Oh, you chicks like wedding dresses. Here, maybe if you like wedding dresses, you'll like our low taxes." Or there's one other ad out there where there 4 women standing on a kitchen table saying, why isn't why do they keep talking about abortion? Why are they talking about Keystone? They're lecturing to these women, saying, "Here's what you should believe in." Not listening to saying, "Oh, that's what you do believe. I will recalibrate to serve the voter that I'm trying to appeal to." They don't necessarily know how to do that. Now, there are some examples. Again, you go back to Colorado, Cory Gardner. I think he's a phony. But he is saying that he's for access to birth control. He renounces some of his past extreme anti-abortion stances, and don't worry, he's a real good guy. He's not going to do anything harsh. He's in good stead because he has changed his rhetoric to match the electorate, not being condescending and trying to jam a right-wing agenda down someone's throat who doesn't already believe it.
Yeah, we'll find out the day after Election Day what he really believes. But I look at the guy who's running for governor in Illinois, this billionaire guy who didn't he not too long ago say he made his money the old-fashioned way? He inherited it.
Yeah, he's even bragging. I'm not the 1%. I'm the 0.00+1%. And he was found to be part of a $400,000 Wine of the Month Club or some such. And the Democratic governor there has made great hay with that. He's another one of these guys who just is way too proud of himself that he got the silver spoon put in his mouth. And again, another race where Republicans are probably in a good position to win if they didn't put up somebody who was that clumsy and talking about his wealth and his success. And now it's a dogfight.
There's part of me that goes, maybe we need a good beating as a public. Maybe we need the Republicans to take over and this class of Republicans, these condescending, pointing down from their mount kind of people, maybe just to shame us into reality that we're really not in the same world and we're never going to be in the same world with them.
Well, I don't want the people to suffer. I don't necessarily think it's the public's fault if that's what happens. We have an election now where it's not going to be truly representative of the public. This is not a national referendum. Only certain states are up for re-election this year. They skew right. The turnout, the demographics of the turnout will likely be different than in 2012. It won't be as much of a cross section. But what may happen if Republicans do win, which I think is certainly a possibility, and I have a piece about this over at Politico. It's called "Good News: Democrats are Going to Lose," which I think is a bit glib, of course, and certainly they're going to lose. But the point was that if Republicans do win, they have full control of the Congress. Well, what's going to happen? They're going to take their low-level civil war that was churning in the House this past 2 years, and the dysfunctional way Boehner had to run the place because of their civil war. They're just going to export that civil war to a second front in the Senate.
Yep.
They're not running on a unified agenda. They don't have clear positions on a lot of these tough issues. The first order of business when they get to town is going to be, how do we keep the government open again? How do we raise the debt limits? We don't have a debt default. They don't have agreement in their caucus on how to do that. Mitch McConnell, the Senate leader, has said, well, if we win, I'm going to put these spending bills in front of the president. I'm going to tack on a bunch of poison pills that will restrict what he's allowed to do in the executive branch. Well, that's likely to get vetoed. And when it gets kicked back to the House and the Senate, Boehner and McConnell have said in the past, we can't have shutdowns. We can't have debt defaults. We're going to have big Tea Party caucuses that don't agree with that.
Yep.
And they're going to have to manage that mess. Ted Cruz and Rand Paul are going to be grandstanding on the Senate floor, making Mitch McConnell's life miserable. And if they can't show they know how to govern in a mature, responsible way, that just codifies this sense that they're not a serious party. It would infect every Republican running for president in 2016. I think it would be a total train wreck for them.
But don't you think we should have learned that already for the last 4 years, Bill? I mean, come on. I mean, at some point, you got to look at this and go, what is. And it's amazing that McConnell's even got a shot of winning, given it's one of the poorest states in the country. I was just reading something the other day. One of the counties there in Kentucky is the poorest county in the country. 98% of the people in that county are on some form of public assistance, yet 95% of them are registered Republicans.
Well, people just are not, politically obsessed. They don't read the newspapers or catch the news every day. They don't know the nuances of how Congress works. And so when times are bad, sometimes they just want to do the opposite of what they have right now.
Yeah.
Just to say, I think if you look at the polls, you do not see an ideological shift to the right. Yes, Obama's numbers are down, but Republican numbers are worse. So that says to me that you're not seeing a dislike of progressive policies. You're seeing a disgust with how Washington works in general.
Right.
That things aren't getting done. And so you see a lot of incumbents, regardless of party, in trouble now. Even though this might mean Republicans take over the Senate, incumbents like Pat Roberts in Kansas are having a tough time because he's now seen as part of the problem in Washington. So I think to the average voter, they just want to see Washington get moving again, and they might just vote for the other guy to see that happen. But if in doing so, they give Republicans full control, that puts a big fat spotlight on them. And they're the ones who are saying, where are the jobs and why isn't Obama doing more? Well, here's your chance, buddy. Here's your chance to shine. Let's see how you do. I don't think they're ready for prime time to be able to pull that trick off.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that works it out. Last one I've got for you. I know you're up there in Massachusetts, and the home of the woman who ran, in my view, the absolute worst political campaign in the history of campaigns. Maybe almost as bad as the guy from Massachusetts who lost for president a number of years before. But how's she doing? How's Coakley doing in the gubernatorial run up there?
That's tight. She's up by a couple in most polls. There I think one or two polls where she's down, but most of them have her up by a bit. And she's definitely taking a lot of flack, from a lot of locals who don't consider to be, a compelling candidate on the stump. But as I've tried to remind folks around here, every governor's race in Massachusetts from 1990 onward has been a pretty close race with the exception of two. And most of those races Republicans have won. There's a history of Republicans winning governor's races here because they can play the card saying, I'll be a check on the Democratic legislature. I'll kind of keep these guys from not spending too much. So it was never a slam dunk for a Democrat to win the governor's race here, and she's still up by a bit. And one of the things that might have hurt the Republican here, Charlie Baker, is that he literally won the award for outsourcing excellence from the Outsourcing Center. They actually have an ad him holding the trophy for outsourcing excellence. So she has a couple of quivers in her bow and arrow that I think are going to serve her well, and I'm hopeful she's going to be okay.
The award for outsourcing excellence. I wonder if my favorite billionaire ever got that award. My favorite billionaire being the guy who owns the Ravens, Shots Biscotti. He made his money by outsourcing. I wonder if he ever got that award.
I don't know. I mean, Troy Baker was the best. So, anyone can outsource, but to do it well requires a certain skill.
There you go. And to get an award for it, hey, good for him. Let's just hope he's not sitting in your governor's mansion. Anyway, Bill, I appreciate you taking time for us, and thanks for filling us in on some of the insanity around the country.
My pleasure.
Thanks so much. Our good friend Bill Scher from the Campaign for America's Future, ourfuture.org, the website. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
This is a fading American dream. This is a fading American dream. This is a fading American dream.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is your World in 2. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service. Once a year, the 193 members of the UN General Assembly meet in New York to select 5 countries to serve on the UN Security Council. Much of the drama of the process has been stripped away, with continental groups deciding well in advance who will be nominated. But this year, after Angola, Malaysia, New Zealand, and Venezuela coasted through a first round of votes, 2 countries remain to contest the final seat, Spain and Turkey. It took 3 rounds of voting for one of them to earn a necessary 2/3 majority.
Spain, 132. Turkey, 60.
Both Spain and Turkey have served on the council before, but Turkey's defeat stings as the country attempts to highlight its geopolitical relevance. Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu traveled to New York to drum up support and participate in today's vote, but his presence wasn't enough to tip the scales. Turkey is deeply affected by both the Syrian civil war and the current campaign against the Islamic State. But Ankara's decision earlier this week to bomb Kurdish PKK militants within its own borders, instead of assisting the Kurdish defenders across the border in Kobani, appeared to dampen the country's diplomatic standing. After Venezuela's election to the council, its foreign minister, Rafael Ramirez, dedicated the victory to Commander Hugo Chavez, saying the country's recognition was a sign of global support for its program of social justice. The United States was unconvinced. In an unusually pointed statement, Ambassador Samantha Power alleged that, quote, Venezuela's conduct at the UN has run counter to the spirit of the UN Charter, and its violations of human rights at home are at odds with the Charter's letter. The 5 new members of the Security Council will begin their 2-year terms in January. For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
We've been talking about our 5 presidents who served as such without ever winning election to the office. The most unique was Gerald Ford. The previous 4 had all at least been elected vice president, but Ford was handpicked by President Richard Nixon after Nixon's VP resigned. Eventually, Nixon resigned himself, leaving Ford to take the presidency without ever having run for national office. After serving out Nixon's term, however, Ford did campaign for president in his own right, but lost. Our country had gone through 51 years and its first 8 presidents before John Tyler became the first to step into a vacancy. The first 4 vice presidents to ascend to the presidency all did so between 1841 and 1881. But it was 93 years and 17 presidents later before Gerald Ford became the most recent vice president to step up to the Oval Office. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? Visit AFSCME.org. We are AFSCME.
When I watch the times now, they don't faze me. Even if I look and act really crazy, I won't wait till she betrayed me. Now my vision is no longer hazy. I'm very lucky to have my crew. Bitch to find me when she flew. I've been knocked down, beat down, black and blue. She's not the one coming back for you. She's not the one coming back for you. If I fall back down, you'll want to me back home again.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So, and looking at this campaign website, Photoshop stuff going on with the Corbett camp, I find it interesting, because one of the things that I would hate to do if I were running a campaign, the last thing you want to be doing is using stock photos. You want to use actual people, actual campaign people, just for the messaging that goes into this. The entire website and I would argue probably all of the things that they've put out on some level have been photoshopped. And it's interesting that the picture, the Photoshop image of the woman that they put into this, they even changed the color of her clothing. They changed the way she was looking. They changed the color of her clothing. I mean, did everything they could do to deceive. I mean, if you're going to use a stock photo, put it on there. You know, these are stock images. Be honest about it. So when asked, about the stock image, when asked, hey, why is it that the only black person you have on your website is a stock photo? They didn't say, well, we were just looking for diversity in our website, and we used stock photos of all kinds of people because we want to, show the population of the state, and we're inclusive to everybody and all that stuff. No. That's not what their campaign did. No, they criticized the Wolf camp. They criticized Wolf. The statement was, quote, Governor Corbett has a strong record of inclusion, while our opponent, Tom Wolf, was even criticized by members of his own party for his ties serving as a campaign chairman for an admitted racist arrested for murder and for handing out ammunition at a race riot. Yeah, 50 years ago. I've had a number of people tell me this story, that the guy that they're talking about, and I can't remember his name off the top of my head, Charlie something or other, actually came around to be a decent guy, coached Little League, and was a pillar of the community before this all broke. Learned the lesson, changed, kind of showing that people can change. And I find it ironic that even it's been vetted, it's been put out that the Corbett camp, they still have to they're going to throw that out there because they have got nothing else. Nothing. I find it ironic, and I find it very interesting. But I guess it is exactly what it is. And it explains why this governor, an incumbent, is so far down in the polls. And that's kind of the shocking thing in this, to see this governor so far behind in the polls because he hasn't done anything. I was talking with somebody earlier, and they go, well, why has this been such a quiet election season? I go, because the governor doesn't have anything to run on. All there is attack, and people don't really want to hear attack so much. They want to know what you did, and he hasn't done anything. I mean, even the one accomplishment that you could possibly give him, which is the transportation funding, broke the Grover Norquist pledge that he said he wasn't going to raise taxes. He did, big time. But even that wasn't nearly enough, and not as much as his own people say it should have been. I mean, that's the ironic part of all this. But if you look at the breadth of his service as governor, it's been failure after failure. It's been wasted tax dollar after wasted tax dollar and misplaced priorities. I mean, can you sum it up any better? There have been no major accomplishments and tons of failures. That seems to be it. So we'll see. We'll see come November 4th. And my hope is that people get out the vote, mark it on the calendar, do whatever you got to do to remind yourself. Tuesday, November 4th, the first Tuesday of the month after the first Monday. You got to get out and vote. Simple, simple, simple. Right back.
Ain't gonna take it, it's our time. We want the world and we want it now. We're gonna take it anyhow. We want the airwaves.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
Stay alive.
Climate change is in large part due to human activity.
Paul Ryan backs away, sort of, from outright climate science denial.
You see some change of tone, even from those who have been aggressive climate change deniers.
We may have reached peak climate change denial.
Natural gas, if extracted safely, it's the bridge fuel that can power our economy with less of the carbon pollution that causes climate change.
Turns out natural gas isn't a bridge fuel to a low emissions future. Plus, did a U.S. defense contractor really invent a compact nuclear fusion reactor? Separating fact from fiction.
Because that's what we do. All of that and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comments.
From the intersection of politics and unmitigated corporate gall.
Hey, Rachel Maddow, don't give away our address on live TV. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, let me say before we begin that I am highly, highly dubious of the theories that you offered in the teaser that these right-wingers, Paul Ryan and other climate science deniers, are actually backing off of their climate science denial.
I would call it more like tricky waffling, if anything.
Yeah, at best.
Well, we'll get to that in a moment. But first, you may have heard the big splash this week that aerospace and defense giant Lockheed Martin made with a press release claiming that their research team had achieved the holy grail of nuclear energy, a breakthrough in nuclear fusion, promising small and super cheap nuclear reactors the size of a pickup truck.
No, actually, I didn't hear that. Then again, I've been hiding in the basement with my Ebola hazmat suit on, so I don't really know much of what's going on at all.
Well, not to worry. It does look like nuclear scientists who are not employed by Lockheed Martin are pouring skepticism all over that press release, noting that it lacks technical details like actual results that can be independently verified and an actual working prototype. They say the press release appears to be just angling for more research money.
But what would this nuclear fusion device mean if it was for real?
It's perpetually 10 to 30 years in the future, but if it were for real, it would be a small nuclear reactor that would have very little nuclear waste and would hopefully be a lot cheaper and quicker to construct.
And safer, right? Because nuclear fusion is different than the nuclear fission that we have in our current nuclear reactors.
Right.
But you remain skeptical.
As do most nuclear scientists, apparently.
Good. Good for you and good for them.
Meanwhile, natural gas is not a bridge fuel that will help the U.S. transition to a low-emissions future, as President Obama has claimed. That's according to a new study published this week in the journal Nature. The study examines a lot of moving parts, including energy markets and future energy demand. But the basic upshot of this study is that even if natural gas drillers curbed their methane gas leaks, the surge in cheap, cleaner natural gas is actually increasing energy use and emissions in the U.S., which is offsetting emissions cuts from coal. And worse, investment in the fracking boom is displacing investment in renewable energy sources.
To give the context, a lot of environmentalists had pointed to natural gas, said, oh, it doesn't put off as much carbon, but in fact, it puts off a whole lot more methane, which is also a greenhouse gas. And now we're using more of it because we're producing so much more of it.
Yeah, that's right. Moving on to elections, we've been reporting how the corporate media has suddenly decided to ask candidates about climate change after thoroughly ignoring it for years. In general, Democratic candidates this cycle have walked a fine line of accepting climate science without alienating the fossil fuel industry. But it's getting really tricky for Republicans, where outright denial was a litmus test in the primaries, but is not helpful in the general election. Here's Wisconsin Republican Representative Paul Ryan, who outright denied global warming as a vice presidential candidate just 2 years ago. Now he's shifting to saying he doesn't know if humans are responsible in a debate this week.
I don't know the answer to that question, and I don't think science does either. Does climate change occur? Yeah. Yes, of course we have climate change. We've had climate change forever. Is human involvement involved? Yes, it is. What extent? I don't know.
Yeah, he doesn't know. The scientists know, but he ignores those scientists because, he's not a scientist, all of that.
It does look like the political tide may be turning against climate denial, at least according to the State Department's chief climate negotiator with the United Nations, Todd Stern.
I think we are moving toward a tipping point. We're not there yet, but it's coming, I think. You see some change of tone, even from those who have been aggressive climate change deniers. I doubt actually that even a year from now, whether major political candidates will consider it a viable strategy to deny the existence of climate change.
I think that Todd Stern of the U.S. State Department is a climate change denier. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. While you're there, please consider a donation to help the Green News Report stay on the air and help bradblog.com do all that we do. We really need your help. Find us and follow us on the Facebooks and the Twitter at Green News Report from bradblog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Dreamer, you know you are a dreamer. Can you put your hands in your head? Oh no, I said dreamer, nothing but a dreamer. can't stop us. They don't know why. They try. Can't let us. We'll never die. We are on the march of the damned.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. So reliving a bit of my youth. As I said the other day, I went to see Judas Priest in Allentown, and really a great little stadium they've built there in Allentown, and have done a really nice job of revitalizing that area. And like we talked yesterday with the Allentown mayor, the work that they've done there, the vision of the future, not the kind of nonsense we've been handed by our Republican brethren here in the state, actually investing in our communities. Wow, what a novel concept. Just is what it is. Anyway, let's find out what's going on around the world and in Washington, D.C. Justin Duckham, Talk Radio News Service. Justin, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, great to be here. And I just have to say I am absolutely jealous that you got to see Priest. I haven't been able to see him since 2004, but they were probably one of the best live bands I've seen. Them and Iron Maiden, in terms of just the good old school, headbanging metal stuff.
Yep.
They still got it.
No, yeah. I mean, they were one of the bands that I didn't get to see when I was a kid. Back when they were popular in the 80s, I was broke. I didn't have the money to go, so I missed it. When I saw it came up, I go, you know what? I'm gonna play 16 again, and we head out and had a fantastic time. They were fantastic.
That's great. And from what I heard, they've still kept pretty good care of themselves. AC/DC I saw probably back in 2002, and then saw them again about 10 years later, and that was just sort of a mess. They were kind of just 10 years had not really done them very many favors, and I'm kind of dreading to see what the next tour is going to look like, especially considering Malcolm's out of the band and stuff now. But good for you. I'm glad you got to relive that 16-year-old fantasy.
Yeah, the problem is like I was telling my daughter yesterday, when I wanted to see them, I was maybe her age, a little bit older. She's 12, and now she's the band that I went to see is only a couple of years younger than her grandmother.
That's hilarious. And I guess when you wanted to see him, Rob Halford still had hair and was still I guess ostensibly straight.
Yeah, he's still in the closet. Yeah, no. But the other thing is and I had that come out a couple of times. He's. I didn't care then, and look, everybody knew then. He may have been in the closet, but everybody looked at him. And go, yeah, come on, you might as well come out. We all know. And here's the other part: didn't care. Love the music. That simple.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, thank God their fans were, supportive about that. It could have been ugly, especially considering, the stereotypes you hear about, like, the kind of grungy metal types. But, thank God we have a modicum of decency in that sort of community.
There you go. Let's find out what's going on. I guess we've now got an Ebola czar, so we're not all going to die today.
Nope. We have an Ebola czar. This is Ron Klain, of course, the former chief of staff for Vice President Joe Biden, as well as Al Gore, and he was appointed today by the administration to oversee the Ebola crisis. And predictably, this is getting some pretty heated right-wing reaction. We know, of course, that a lot of right-wingers are uncomfortable about the very notion of a czar in general, but this time they're essentially raising complaints with the fact that he does not have any medical background and instead, sort of an administrative figure.
Sounds like they're sending out the National Guard as we speak. But here's the thing. I thought we had a medical czar. We used to call him a Surgeon General.
We certainly did. We have an acting Surgeon General right now, but we had another gentleman who was supposed to be approved as the Surgeon General quite a while ago. This was Vivek Murthy, and he was ultimately blocked by Republicans because he apparently believes that, gun violence is somehow linked to public health, which is kind of funny. The idea that, little round things that travel at great speeds and can kill you could potentially be linked to public health. But for that grave sin, the Republicans decided to block him. And here we are today without sort of a figurehead to really coordinate this that people can really look to. Solely because of the NRA.
But Justin, Guns don't kill people. People do.
Of course. How could I have been so?
But the gun helps. I've never pointed my finger at someone and said bang and had them fall.
That's a very good point.
So I mean, there is that. But here's the thing that gets me is we're seeing all of these stories and all of this what I think is irresponsible journalism, and it's rare. I believe I agree with anything that comes out of Fox News, but Shepard Smith I think is right in saying that it's irresponsible to have this kind of this panic that's being screamed about, that we're all going to die in the end of the world, and buy your Ebola suits and your gloves and your masks. Or am I missing something?
No, I mean, it is irresponsible. There's very few steps that people can really take that would actually make sense in order to prevent them from, contracting this. There's also very little likelihood that anybody will actually, will contract this in the U.S. Compared to the multitude of other factors that we have to fear in day-to-day American life, or just due to our long-term health issues. This is certainly, being significantly overplayed. Nevertheless, we do have some pretty shocking images coming into people's homes. This, of course, can shut down an entire hospital or can sort of wreak havoc with public transportation and whatnot. But that also kind of raises the thing that you were mentioning, which was the dangers of the panic situation. If we really portray this as something that's sort of a boogeyman, and we have people being maybe overly vigilant, it looks like we may have a lot of false alarms, and that may be just as dangerous as the disease itself.
Yeah, I said, I asked someone yesterday where they were going on vacation. I said, "Are you flying?" And they go, "Oh yeah, I'm dreading it." I go, "I would be too, because first you got to take off your shoes, then your belt, and I guess while you got your belt off, you're gonna have to drop your drawers because they're gonna shove a thermometer up your backside."
Yeah, exactly. Again, that's only for about 105 passengers a day or something like that. We're traveling from countries, but that's cries for much more dramatic steps to be taken from the administration. Of course, one of those is the travel ban, which is frankly a pretty irresponsible approach to this, since of course it'll drive people underground, and we won't be able to monitor Ebola patients if they actually do arrive in the U.S. But yeah, this is certainly a moment of hysteria, and obviously not warranted, but one that people are nevertheless not getting the message on.
So you're not going to go along with the Glenn Beck, the UPS truck leaves full and comes back empty. Why can't we send a plane?
That's no, I'm not going to join that. And I think simply, we don't really want to have that sort of situation where we close off borders and whatnot, or where we have, a situation where people are coming into the country illegally if they're infected to seek better medical care, but also not being in a situation where U.S. officials can sort of be kept to light. And I think at this point, Republicans have sort of turned this into a purely partisan affair by
it
really
should be,
but
Justin, it should be a purely partisan issue. They're the ones who defunded the CDC and the NIH and all of the foreign aid funds that have been cut off. It's all of the sequester, all of the to the edge kind of hostage situation budgeting that I blame on this.
No, of course, that's a very good point. That's something that has been brought up time and time again. And all we're sort of hearing from Republicans is just sort of lame sighs, and then them pointing to, some pretty ridiculous examples of maybe $250,000 that go to, funny sounding projects from NIH that essentially, dismiss the entire institute as sort of a joke. So
you mean like the guy from Red State saying that fat lesbians ate up all the money?
That is, of course, one of the big ones. I've seen some others coming by, but when you really look at the level of the amount of funding it gets, it's ridiculously small compared to all these other huge expenditures we have in the U.S. for, frankly, more controversial aspects. I'd consider wasting about several million a day on combating ISIS is a much bigger waste of cash than charting obesity in certain populations. And, we're not really hearing much on Republicans from that. So I think, it's a little bit disingenuous to say the least.
And I guess there was a panic at the Pentagon?
There was a panic at the Pentagon today. Apparently, there was a woman who had just returned from Africa who ended up vomiting on a bus outside of the Pentagon reservation. This sort of ground a lot of things to the halt at that time. Arlington County Fire Department ended up responding immediately. The victim was taken to a nearby hospital, but at this point, there's not much, evidence that this may have in fact been a legitimate Ebola case.
Yeah, she was just sick. Car sickness sometimes happens.
Yeah.
But the thing that gets me is every time something like this is going to pop up, Ebola. And because my kid, came home last week scared to death. The end of the world's coming, Dad. Didn't you hear? We're all going to die of Ebola. And I'm going, who told you that? Oh, we're watching it on the news, and teacher said this and that. And I'm going, more people die every year from going to the bathroom than are going to die from this right now.
Mm-hmm.
Insane. Finally, if we live long enough, evidently there's some same-sex marriage developments.
Some pretty interesting things coming out today. One of those is that Arizona's couples who are in same-sex relationships are now allowed to wed immediately following an appeal court striking down the Arizona law. There's also an announcement coming out of the Department of Justice today from Attorney General Eric Holder, who said that the federal government is now going to be recognizing same-sex marriages in 5 additional states where the Supreme Court essentially struck down bans by refusing to handle challenges to some lower court appeals. And this is just sort of this new trend that we're seeing, where we're seeing states that we never really would have considered to be taking this stuff on suddenly winning court battles, and a federal government that seems more than happy to comply with that sort of change in legal attitudes. Alaska is one of the other big ones, and this is just something that's sort of coming off as the new normal that we're going to be seeing as the years come on.
It'll be interesting to see where that takes us. Justin, have a great weekend. I appreciate you taking time for us.
Thank you. You too.
Our good friend Justin Duckham, Talk Radio News Service. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
We've taken too much for granted, and all the time it had grown. From techno seeds we first planted, evolved a mind of its own. Marching in the streets, dragging iron feet.
Okay, that's it. No more Mr. Nice Guy for me. The avarice of corporate power has now turned personal. It's about beer, the nourishing nectar of a civilized society. Since my teen years, I've done extensive and intensive consumer research on the brewer's art, from the full array of ales to the most substantial of stouts. I weathered the depressing era when Budweiser, Miller, and a couple of other nationalizers of bland beer drove a diversity of livelier regional brands out of business. But then I rejoiced in the last decade or so as a flowering of craft and microbrews has spread from city to city, creating an abundance of real gusto and local flavor from coast to coast. But beware, ye who love local beer, do not just sit on your duffs doing 12-ounce elbow bends, for here comes the big brew bastards again, bigger and more menacing than ever. In fact, they've gone global, wielding their predatory marketing clout and political muscle to rule beer world once and for all. S.A.B. Miller, now a South African conglomerate, is trying to take over Heineken, the world's 3rd largest beer maker. But Anheuser-Busch, now owned by a Belgian-Brazilian monopolist called InBev, is trying to buy S.A.B. Miller, creating a single beer behemoth that would control 1/3 of all beer sales in the world. In our U.S. of A., the monopolization is worse, with InBev and S.A.B. Miller effectively controlling 3/4 of our beer market. If InBev swallows S.A.B. Miller, we're looking at higher prices, lower quality, and few choices. This is Jim Hightower saying, meanwhile, the red, white, and blue icon of American beer, Pabst Blue Ribbon, which dates back to 1844 and itself is a merged conglomerate that owns Colt 45, Old Milwaukee, and Schlitz, is being bought by a Russian brewer. Where is Teddy Roosevelt when we really need him?
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's populist take on what the powers that be are up to. Find out more at hightowerlowdown.org.
No matter how hard you try, you can't stop us now.
The proud defender of the American dream, Rick Smith.
Since the prehistoric ages and the days of ancient Greece, walked down to the Middle Ages, planet Earth kept going through changes, and then the Renaissance came, and times continue to change. Nothing stayed the same, but there were always renegades, like you said.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. There's a petition been launched against the Jimmy John's. And again, it's another one of these fast food joints who just some really very unsavory business practices. The petition is calling on Jimmy John's to end its policy of forcing their workforce to sign non-compete agreements. Think about this for a second. Making a sandwich, putting bread and meat together, that's proprietary. And you can't take it with you to the next place, or you can't even take it home. And that's really kind of funny if you think about it. I mean, and it's one of those things that just, it's sad, but it's what we've allowed them to get away with for so long that, well, it's how we've always done things. Didn't you know? It's how things have always been done. And, I got to tell you, it's just plain weird to me. That a sandwich, a fast food place, it's like McDonald's like, sorry, you can't flip burgers anywhere else. That flipping motion is ours. And for 2 years, you can't do anything. It's nuts, just nuts. But, this is what we've allowed these employers to get away with. And, what is it? What does an 18-year-old or a 15 or a 16-year-old kid know? What do they know? Oh, just sign this. It's like when I came and I talked about the binding arbitration agreement the doctor, shoved in front of me to sign. I actually talked to someone who said, I heard that on the program, and I was talking about it to my wife, and she goes, hey, you signed one of those. He didn't even realize that he signed one. Because we've just come to accept whatever's thrown at us. It's ridiculous. Here's one of those funny Christmas seasons coming up upon us, and the war on Christmas is going to begin. Evidently, the Americans United for Separation of Church and State, they have warned Florida officials that if a holiday display proposed by the Satanic Temple cannot be banned simply because it's grossly offensive. Americans United for Separation of Church and State Director Reverend Barry Lynn said state officials have no right to determine what is offensive when it comes to religion. Considering I know a lot of people who find religion at all offensive, in its entirety offensive. Evidently last year when the Satanic Temple display was excluded, the State House Rotunda was used as a display place for a nativity scene, a Festivus pole, and a rendering of a Pastafarian flying spaghetti monster. So there you go. Personally, I don't think it should be, you have a tree, whatever. But I think all of the individual, it's gotten outrageous. That simple. And finally, a little bit of history today, a little bit of labor history. On this day in 1814, in London, there was a vat of beer that ruptured, and the vat took out another vat and another, and what became the Great London Beer Flood, nearly 1.5 liters of beer flooded the streets, drowning at least 8 people, mostly people who were living in the basements of nearby homes. How'd you like to go that way? Wow. Horrible. Also today in 1950, the Salt of the Earth strike began. Mostly Mexican Americans in the mining industry in New Mexico It lasted 14 months. It was the strike that the movie Salt of the Earth was based on. It was a 14-month strike against the New Jersey Zinc Company. And it's a great movie, a must-see movie. I think it's on YouTube. It's a bunch of places. But New Jersey Zinc Company, I think about that place. If you go up in Pennsylvania, they killed a whole side of a mountain. There you go. Anyway, have a great weekend. We'll see you back here on Monday.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
It's covered like the tide of flood beneath the lunar sway. Imperial, mysterious, in amorous array. Democracy is coming to the USA.